Pursuant to Standing Order 108.3G, the Committee is resuming consideration of Report 6, Sustainable Development Technology Canada, of the 2024 reports 5 to 7 of the Auditor General of Canada.
Welcome our witness who's joining us remotely, Navdeep Bains. And I understand you have an opening remark, which is, of course, welcome, and you're right, and you have 5 minutes. The floor is yours, sir. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Merci, Monsieur le Président. Bonjour.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hello.
My name is Navdeep Bains, and from November of 2015 to January 12th of 2021, I served as Canada's Minister of Innovation, Science, and Industry. Having once appeared at the Standing Committee on Industry, I'm here to answer any questions regarding Sustainable Development Technology Canada and my role when I was Minister. Again, Sustainable Development Technology Canada is an arm's-length organization established by an Act of Parliament, and as Minister, my only role, as outlined by the Act, was to make appointments to the Sustainable Development Technology Canada Board. The appointments that I made when I was Minister were recommended to me through a fair, open, and transparent process brought forward in 2016 to allow more opportunities for all Canadians to serve their country. Through that process, all positions are posted publicly on the GIC appointments website. Applications are simple and made online, and postings are posted until an appointment is made. The goal was to bring a consistent process to appointments. After receiving applications for an appointment, a selection panel was led by the Privy Council Office with supports from across government. These panels conducted interviews with the candidates and presented ministers with short lists of candidates. Positions were kept open until a successful candidate was recommended. Accordingly, it would also not be uncommon for multiple groups of candidates to be recommended. I recommended over 100 applicants in this open, transparent, merit-based process from when I was first appointed minister in November 2015 until I left cabinet on January the 12th, 2021. With respect to the relationship between myself and Sustainable Development Technology Canada, as I have previously testified, Sustainable Development Technology Canada is an arm's-length organization. My role as Minister of Innovation, Science, and Industry was to recommend 7 of the 15 board members, including the chair. While funding for Sustainable Development Technology Canada flowed through the department, we were not responsible for the management and governance of the staff or board. I believe in the clean tech sector and the benefits it has brought to Canada. I am proud of the incredible people and companies that have made this sector in Canada a global leader.
Okay, he's over his time.
Once again, I am here to answer your questions. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. We'll begin now our first round. It's 4 members who each have 6 minutes each. Mr. Perkins, you have the floor for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, former Liberal Minister Bains. Former Liberal Minister Bains, as a Minister of the Crown, you're responsible to Parliament for all parliamentary appropriations under your department, are you not, in addition to appointments?
When all ministers set budgets, they need to be approved by Parliament. That is correct.
Right, you're accountable for that. So you're accountable for every dollar that's spent that that was allocated. I'm going to ask you, first of all, about your appointment of the chair, Annette Verschuren, who at this committee said 3 times that she didn't apply, that you phoned her twice to ask her to serve. And then,
point of order, Mr. Chair.
She applied after that.
Sorry,
It's
Mr.
not a
Perkins.
point of debate, Mr.
Hold
Durant.
on. I do have a point of order. I do have to hear
Okay, we'll start all over again then.
the point of order. Yes, Mr. Durant.
The particular person he's talking
That's
about has
debate.
corrected the record,
she
in
hasn't.
writing. Thank you so much.
No, she hasn't.
Well,
That's not a point of
she
order.
okay.
No, she hasn't. If you will listen,
Okay,
you will get the
gentlemen,
answer. So I'll
stop.
start all
This is
over again.
clearly a point of debate.
No, it isn't.
I'll just remind the government members that I don't
You're a government member.
I don't like needless point of orders on either side. So my point, though, is not to highlight that it's a government member issue. It's not. It happens occasionally on both sides when debate gets heated. But you always have the immediately right of reply after Mr. Perkins. It is you, in fact, Mr. Drouin. And I hope that if you extend, in your side, courtesy on the official opposition, they will do the same. And if they do not do so, I will censure them as well. I am going to back up the clock for Mr. Perkins. You can restart your question, Mr. Perkins, not the time, just your question. So I'm backing up the clock, not from the top, but you can start your question from the top.
He interrupted me before I even got my question.
Mr. Perkins, I'm backing up the clock. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Bains, you phoned, according to Annette Verschuren, you phoned her twice to ask her to serve. Is that correct? Because that's what she said at the committee.
As I have stated in my previous
I don't want a
testimony
dissertation
at
on the
Hindu,
appointment process. It's a simple yes or no. You phoned her twice, yes or no?
as I stated in my previous testimony at industry committee, I reached out to a number of people during my tenure as a minister and asked them to participate in this open,
You called her
transparent,
twice.
merit-based.
Order, Mr. Chair?
Perkins.
Oh,
I
no,
would
not
call
Khalid.
stop the clock.
No.
Yes, please.
Thank you very much. I believe that Ms. Verschuren, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce her name, did
Again, this is
correct her
this.
testimony.
Okay, I just ruled on this. This is not a
It
point
doesn't
of
make
order.
sense.
We will
Stop.
start
It
from
does
the
not
Stop.
make sense.
Okay,
It does not make
all right.
sense
This
for us
is
to
a-
continue
We will start from
I
the top.
to
endeavored
harass
at
a witness
Miss
on this. The
Miss
evidence is
Khalid.
there, so I'm just not sure why. It just
She applied after the
does
phone
All right,
not
call.
make
Mr.
sense
Perkins,
at
Mr.
all, so
Mr.
let's
Perkins.
not.
And you'll
Let's
learn
not go
something
down that
for a
road.
change.
Mr.
Why don't
Perkins.
you want to learn anything?
Mr. Perkins,
Or is it
I will.
just part of the cover-up coalition?
Mr. Perkins, Mr. Perkins, I remind
I
the
take
court before
personal
before I
exception
remind
to
You
what
should.
Mr.
I take
Perkins just
exception
said,
to your cover-up.
Chair.
we are going to suspend for a
Absolutely.
minute.
Holy crap, what is going on? What a gong show. Miss Khalid needs to read the Green Book. Holy crap. I could get a group of 12-year-olds to do better. Oh, man. Oh, that was... You can just see how this committee's going to go, guys, if that's the way we're starting it off. Holy smokes. Oh. Crystal Miller, we haven't even started yet. We conservatives can't even ask a bloody question yet. Hey, little noob, thank you for the $2. Thank you for the super chats. Appreciate that. Yeah, wow, what a gong show. I need a beer. Yeah. Oh man, have a drink every time Miss Khalid calls a fruitless point of order. That's not a point of order. Dear Lord. I really want to know what they're saying right now. I really want to know what the chair is saying. This would be really funny to listen to. I wish they didn't suspend it, but I know they have to keep it cordial and keep it civil in committee, but I would really love to know what he's saying to her right now. She's been in office since 2015, and she still doesn't know what a point of order is. When is she going to learn? Or does she just not want to read the Green Book? Oh, man. Okay, so while we're waiting, let's see if we can catch up on something. Nope, they're back already. Perfect. I was really hoping that wasn't going to take too long.
And if I could have everyone's attention, including the official opposition. First, I'm just going to highlight the safety aspect. When everyone is talking at once, it is putting the interpreters in a very, very difficult position. We've made many changes here to ensure that their health is protected. I also want to highlight that Mr. Bains is here for about an hour because of a conflict, which I understand and appreciate him being here. He's agreed to come back. If we continue to go down this rabbit hole and debates that are happening while it's a member's turn to speak, which those items be brought up by an opposing side at a later round, we're not going to get anywhere, and we'll be back. Now, further, I'd committed not to sit next week, but if this devolves the way it is going to devolve, I might reconsider that. Well, Mr. Zorin, you be careful saying that because we sit a lot in recess weeks, a lot, and your colleagues, I don't think. Your colleagues will not appreciate you cheerleading me on calling meetings. No, Mr. Dre, I can assure you they won't. Anyway, if we can proceed civilly, can I say as well that Mr. Bains is an experienced parliamentarian, and I'm sure he's going to be able to provide answers to committee members on both sides. So I hope we can get through this without this devolving into a shouting match again. And I'm going to close lastly on just, again, please respect the interpreter. So, Mr. Perkins, you have about just over 4 minutes on the clock. The floor is yours again. Please begin.
Point of order.
Yes, Mr. Perkins.
I have 6 minutes left.
Pardon me. You have 5 minutes on the clock. Pardon me.
I have 6 minutes on the clock. They haven't allowed me to get a single question.
Mr. Perkins, first of all, you asked a couple of questions about Mr. Bains' role as a minister, what he's responsible for, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not cutting you short. I just want you to know that you've got just over 5 minutes on the clock. The floor is yours, please, Mr. Perkins. Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Bains, when I ask a yes or no question, I appreciate a yes or no, not a rag the puck. Yes or no, you called Annette Fisherian 2 times as she testified here in committee.
As I had mentioned in my previous testimony,
that's not an
I
answer.
was responsible for over 100 governor council
please
recommendations.
Answer the question, or I'm going to
so
interrupt
I don't
you
recall
constantly.
specific
Answer the question. Did you phone her twice? That was her testimony. Is she telling the truth?
As I said, I don't recall any such conversations taking place.
She testified here that 3 times that she was asked by you. Who told you to ask her?
As I've said, in 2016, a new appointments process was introduced. It was open to all Canadians, and it's not uncommon for me as a minister.
I don't need a recitation of your opening statement again, Sergeant Schultz.
Point of order,
I know
Chair.
nothing.
Oh my God, Khaled, point of order again.
I'll go on to the
Point
next
of order,
question.
Chair.
2016,
Sorry,
you appointed
Mr. Perkins,
Andre
I do
Lismatot.
have a point of order. Ms. Khalid, you have the floor.
Maybe it's a point of clarification. I believe that the witness here today is Mr. Bains. I'm not sure who Sergeant Schultz or whoever this member is referring to. Absolutely disrespectful.
Agreed, Mr. Perkins. If you could refer to Mr. Bains as the witness or Mr. Bains, it would be appreciated to maintain decorum in the committee. Thank you.
Former Liberal Minister Bains, in charge of the Liberal Green Slush Fund, you appointed Andre Lismatot in 2016 under your new and clean process, correct?
As I indicated in my opening remarks, my responsibility as a minister is to appoint 7 out of the 15 board members.
And you appointed her. And while she was on the board and while you were minister, $114 million of Green Slush Fund money was voted to her companies. And you had an assistant deputy minister in every single meeting. Do you expect Canadians to believe that you knew nothing?
Sustainable Development Technology Canada is an arm's-length organization. The management oversees the day-to-day operations, and there's a board that oversees management.
It's true.
And again,
they also
as I
have
said in my...
The Cycle Capital, Andre Lise-Mateau's company, also had a lobbyist for 10 years. His name was Stephen Guilbeault. It still is Stephen Guilbeault. He lobbied for 10 years. $100 million during those 10 years went to Cycle Capital. He met 25 times with your office and you in the year before he was nominated. Do you remember any of those meetings?
During my tenure as a minister, I met with a number of stakeholders from the clean tech sector. I don't recall any specific meetings with the individuals you have mentioned.
You don't remember meeting with the now radical Liberal Environment Minister who was a nominated
order,
Liberal
Mr.
candidate?
Oh my God, if she does another point
So
of order, I'm
I
going to
will
throw the
ask
green
you
book at her.
again.
Mr. Perkins, one second.
I'm not sure
Yes,
why
Ms. Good.
there's name calling going on within our committee here.
He's proud of being a radical.
Please. This one I will allow. These are statements we hear in the floor.
Which you guys have established. You guys keep repeating those statements.
Miss-
So I'm not sure
Well, Miss-
why you think that it is okay
Mr.
for
Miss-
us in committee
When you get to be the
Miss-
chair of the
to
committee, you
repeat
can rule
those
otherwise.
Miss
and
Khalid.
call them to be credible because they are not credible.
I didn't weigh in on whether they're.
You just did,
I
Chair.
said
You
I
just
said
did.
they're echoing what we hear in the House of Commons, which is permitted. Ergo,
I would
they're
appreciate
permitted here.
if the member redacts those comments.
There's no...
But Ms. Khalid, that's not your call, Mr. Perkins.
asking you to do it, Chair.
Pardon me?
I'm asking you
Oh.
to ask the
No,
member
I-
to redact those comments because they
It's
are
not redact, it's
absolutely
withdraw.
unreasonable
Miss Khalid,
and
Miss
impolite
Khalid, I have
and
ruled
against
that
our
they are.
democratic institutions.
Ms. Khalid, I have ruled that they are in order. Mr. Perkins has the floor. You have the floor, sir.
So you don't remember meeting with radical Liberal Stephen Guilbeault. Do you remember meeting with a fellow named Gerald Butts in those meetings who was working in the PMO? Since he's listed as meeting with you on this at the same time?
As you know, when I was made minister in 2015, Mr. Butts, the individual you mentioned, worked for the Prime Minister's office.
Did he, those meetings were about funding of Cycle Capital Fund 4. That's what's listed in the public thing, and he met with you. And then EDC, after those meetings, invested in Cycle Capital Fund 4. So that happened fairly quickly. Do you remember having those discussions about having Gerald Butts and the now radical Environment Minister lobbying you to get funds for Cycle Capital, whose founder was on the board that you appointed, from EDC?
As I said before, Sustainable Development Technology Canada is an arm's length organization. And as you mentioned at the beginning, budgets are approved through the parliamentary budget process.
So on October 19th, only 14 days after some of those meetings, EDC announced $145 million for that. So you don't recall any of that, just like you didn't recall anything when you were at Industry Committee. Is that correct?
Could you repeat the question, please?
No, I won't repeat it again. You approved, one of the last things you did as minister was approve, after all of this corruption, you took forward another $750 million for the Green Slush Fund, which was announced a month before you left the job to go work at CIBC and now at the most expensive cell phone company in the world, Rogers. So can you tell me,
Point of order,
with
Mr.
all
Speaker.
that corruption
Point of
going
order,
on,
Mr.
why did you
Speaker.
seek
It's
$750
not a speaker, it's a
million
chair.
of more
I have a
taxpayer
point
money?
of order.
Relevancy, the member
Oh,
who is
come on.
before us is not about here to answer about his future life, but here to answer about SDTC.
Well, if you get the
So-
wax out of your ears, you hear that I asked about
Okay,
the
okay,
$750 million approved by cabinet that he took for the
Mr.
Green
Same
Slush
point of
Fund.
order.
Mr.
Chair?
Perkins, your actions are just encouraging them to be belligerent to the chair as you're being belligerent to the chair. I would ask you to cease and desist when a point of order is called. Mr. Drouin, the same goes for you, Mr. Drouin. I allow members on both sides latitude to probe. There is no question of relevance here. Mr. Perkins, Mr. Perkins was, Mr. Perkins is, just let me finish. Mr. Perkins is, as all members, are entitled to ask the questions in the manner they please, but his question is clearly, from what I can see, going in the direction of the topic we're studying. Ms. Khalid, do you have a point of order?
Yeah, on the same point of order that was raised by Monsieur Drouin, I don't see how the wax in his ears has anything to do with the questions that are being asked today.
Thank you. Mr. Perkins, you have, I'll back the clock up. You have the question again. Go ahead.
So I'll make it simple for you, Mr. Bains, since that seems to be the only way to try and get an answer. After $114 million went to Andre Lise-Matteau's companies, you went to Cabinet seeking another $750 million for the Green Slush Fund when 25% of the money was going to Cycle Capital, which Stephen Guilbeault owned shares on, was a lobbyist for. Why did you go to Cabinet for another $750 million for such a corrupt organization?
As been discussed before, Sustainable Development Technology Canada is an arm's-length organization. The management oversees the day-to-day operations. There's an independent board that oversees them, and the budget process is debated in the House of Commons and approved by the House, and these monies are allocated to promote and support the clean tech sector.
Chair, I think this witness is in contempt of this committee since he refuses to answer a question and keeps repeating his either written PMO
point of order,
points
Chair?
Or not. That's all he's doing.
Well, I think we're just
point of order,
starting,
Chair?
and as skilled parliamentarians, you'll have repeated opportunities to get to Mr. Bains answered. Yes, Ms. Khalid.
Chair, I doubt that the member opposite has the qualifications to make those allegations. I believe that it is up to you to decide whether somebody's in contempt or not, and I personally don't think that anybody has been in contempt so far.
Very much. Mr. Perkins, could you ask your question again, and then we will get an answer and move on.
Wow, this chair's about to
Very
blow
simple.
a gasket.
Why did you seek $750 million more for this organization that was funneling money to your Liberal appointments when you knew it was a corrupt organization, and you went forward to give them more money from the taxpayer to further feather bed your political appointees and the Prime Minister's political appointees? Are you really that corrupt?
Budgets are approved by Parliament, and as I said, this is an independent organization that oversees the disbursement of these funds.
Thank you very much. Next up for Mr. Drouin, for 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have to say, I'm still questioning as to the reason why Mr. Bains is before our committee, as Mr. Perkins and both Mr. Cooper got to ask him questions in June, and I'm wondering their competency in auditing, whether or not they are competent to actually ask questions. Because obviously when you get the time to ask questions, you would think that you'd get to the bottom of this, but obviously this is not about getting to the bottom of this, and we've seen it. I've only been here for about 5 meetings, and we're still in the spirit of asking who briefed you, who briefed the witness, and who appointed you to the board. And I find it funny because Mr. Perkins was appointed by a Conservative to a board, and he was appointed in 2008, but in the press release, I don't see that he previously worked for a Conservative government, but we know he did that. And now he has the audacity to ask who appointed who to a certain board. And the funny thing, I find it, I can't, Mr. Chair, I can't find,
Point of order?
I can't stop laughing because it's actually funny because it's hypocritical.
I have a point of order, Mr. Drouin. Yes, Mr. Perkins.
Point of order, relevance. We're not here to talk about the BDC appointments.
Yes.
We're here to talk about the Liberal Green Slush Fund. And I know that's a confusing thing
Thank
for
you.
MP Jurin.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. And again, well, I think Mr. Drouin is having he's a bit off topic. Mr.
You
Drouin
guys
heard my
$400 million.
Okay, Mr. Perkins, we will be back to official opposition members soon. Mr. Drouin, you have the floor again, please.
He actually provides me a great segue. Is it Mrs. Verschuren, who they want to make the Canadians believe that she's a Liberal, but like Mr. Perkins, donated the same exact amount, $1,600, to a Conservative leader potential candidate and the last Tory candidate. Same amount of money. The same amount of money. Mr. Perkins, I can't stop. The hypocrisy is
good for the goose.
L'hypocrisie l'autre côté.
The hypocrisy on the other side is incredible. So you'll allow me.
Mr. Perkins.
The appointment of Ms. Verschuren.
Mr. Perkins, you can just woe les motards a little bit.
Slow down a bit.
You have the floor again.
Well, it's all public records. And I wonder if they were holding hands when they donated together. But again, I've warned this at the last committee. I'm not interested in going into a wild goose chase. And right now, we are entertaining a wild goose chase. They're trying really hard. They're trying really, really hard to make a connection between a minister and some low-level bureaucrat who committed errors. And we're not saying on this side that they haven't committed errors. We agree. But the idea that the minister was connected to that is baloney. And it's just baloney. Well, Mr. Brock, if you were in the courtroom, you would have been fired and disbarred from the Law Society of Ontario, Mr. Brock.
Gentlemen, we're doing ourselves
Holy
no favors
smokes,
here.
guys.
I would ask that we respect Mr. Drouin's time. You have the floor again.
So, Mr. Chair, my point is I've read the transcript from Mr. Bains' appearance at the Indu Committee, and to this day, I have not learned, in the last 6 minutes, have not learned anything new from Mr. Perkins' questioning, other than the fact that they will interrupt Mr. Bains. They will ask them a yes or no questions, knowing full well that he does not know the answer because SDTC is arm's length. And it's always been arm's length. The idea that the minister has direct control over the decisions and the financial decisions of SDTC is out of touch.
Do your homework. You've only been here 5
Monsieur le
minutes.
Président, avec tout,
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Perkins maybe has a right. Maybe his experience at BDC.
Mr. Drouin, I'm just going to try to bring order here. Ms. Khalid, if you have a point of order, I appreciate everyone to say point of order. Otherwise, I just think you're participating in the fun fight that's going across.
Point of order,
Is it a point of order?
then,
Yes,
Chair?
please.
I would appreciate if colleagues can not holler and yell and shriek across the way. My colleague is sitting right beside me, and I can't even hear him based on all of the shrieking that is happening from those folks over there.
Thank you, Ms. Khalid. I too would appreciate that. And again, unfortunately, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So I would ask that all sides refrain from speaking when an individual has the floor. And Mr. Drouin has the floor, please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I can tell I'm ruffling some feathers if we want to talk about goose and ganders and whatnot. But again, perhaps Mr. Perkins has some other idea of how boards work, and perhaps he was breathed down the neck when he was appointed at the BDC, and perhaps ministers' offices were breathing down his necks to make decisions, but that's not how we operate. We change the process. We change the way people are appointed to this to different boards, and it's actually on websites. So the idea that this was some secret Liberal board appointees that somehow benefited our friends and blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm still waiting for my friends to say, thank you so much, Frank, for having benefited to my personal wealth. I have none. So I'll go back again to the rationale as to why Mr. Bains is here is because there was some no. There was some issues with the fact of a testimony which That testimony, the witness later corrected, and it's on the record. She later corrected. I mean, the idea that somebody would somehow accepted an appointment without having applied is ridiculous. Name me any employer who would say, I named this person my employee without having applied. Hey, les gars, là, vous faites pas de sens.
Guys, it doesn't make any sense. You make 0 sense. And you're here, and once again, people applied. These people, Mr. Perkins and Mr. Cooper, had the opportunity to interview and ask questions to Mr. Bains already. And the fact that he's here once again at another committee with the same people makes no sense. 0 sense. I have no question for Mr. Bains. I understand very well. I saw the transcript of the last meeting in June. It didn't take 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months for these people to accuse even before he answered.
You're going to go through a certain issue. You're going to be asked a yes or no answer. You're going to be accused. They're going to opine on certain facts that they will not allow you to answer because they will interrupt you. And that's the way it's gone at Indu Committee. And unfortunately, it's the way it's going to go at this committee.
He's over his time
for this, but we know you had nothing to do with this. There were certain people that had something to do with it, but it was never connected to a minister's office. It was never, and I know you guys are trying hard. Really, I know, Mr. Perkins, maybe it worked at that time when you were at the BDC,
Thank you,
but it certainly does not work at this committee and with the way we appointed people.
Mr. Perkins, Mr. Durain, Mr. Perkins, we will be back to your side. That is the time. Maintenant, c'est Madame Sinclair.
Now, Ms. Sinclair Desgagnés for 6 minutes, please. I'd like to take the first seconds of my time to ask colleagues to please take a deep breath because we have work to do, and I invite my colleagues from the government side to give me their time if they have no questions for Mr. Bains. I have a number of them. So, Mr.
I actually
Bains,
agree with her.
what is your relationship with Amber Batul?
Merci.
Thank you very much for your question.
I worked with Ms. Batul when I was at CIBC.
You didn't know Ms. Batul when she was Chief of Staff of SDTC?
Désolé.
I'm sorry.
Please, sorry, I didn't hear.
You didn't know Ms. Batul when she worked at SDTC?
I think I met her maybe once or twice at an event.
So Ms. Batul was the Chief of Staff of SDTC, and you hadn't spoken to her more than once or twice at the time. Yet Ms. Batul followed you to CIBC. She obtained a position just after you at CIBC. Point of order, Mr. Chair. Once again, they're suspecting that this was a decision made at CIBC. This has nothing to do with SDTC. Can we stick to SDTC? Mr. Drouin, we let you talk about anything when it was your turn. We heard about Mr. Perkins and I don't know what else, but so now Mr. Bains knows very well how to speak. He can answer the questions asked by Ms. Sinclair Desgagnés that she's asking very respectfully.
Madame Sinclair.
So, Madame Sinclair Desgagnés, you have the floor. I think some people are afraid of the answers Mr. Bains could give. So, I'll start again. Ms. Batul followed you to CIBC. Once again, Mr. Chair, I'm going to make a point of order. This has no relation to the decision. If Ms. Sinclair Desgagnés suspects that Mr. Bains made the decision to hire this woman, she needs evidence.
You're on beyond less than thin ice because we just listened to you. The chair allowed you to go on for 6 minutes about yes, and I stopped the clock every time that happened to give you your time. But now for you to jump in and say that another member who's trying to ask questions to the witness can't be allowed to do so. I'm not sure who you think you are.
I don't, Mr. Chair. I think about relevancy of this. Why are we here? We are here to study SDTC, not CIBC, not Rogers, not anything else. SDTC.
And the members' questions are
Point of
going
order, Chair.
exactly
Oh
in
my
that
God. If
direction.
Khalid does another
Yes,
point
Ms.
of order,
Khalid.
I'm going to lose
Point
it.
of order, Chair. I take exception to you questioning who Mr. Drouin thinks he is. He is a member of Parliament with the exact same privileges that we all have in this committee, and I don't think exactly. We have the privileges that we have within this committee, and I don't think that is something that you should be calling out.
That is correct, and Mr. Drouin was given an opportunity to speak. Now, Madame St-Clair Desgagnés, it's not up to Mr. Drouin to suddenly decide that what another member is asking is relevant or not.
Why do we have point of orders, Mr. Chair?
Well, again, I ruled on it, and now I'm moving on. Mr. Perkins, you had a point of order as well.
My point of order is about Mr. Drouin. From the moment I asked my first question within the first minute, he was interrupting. He chose as a tactic to try and disrupt every single sentence I said. Now he's doing it to the block member. It's a specific tactic to disrupt the committee. And because of
I know,
his
there's only 20 minutes
behavior,
left
I would ask you consider
of him
that
questioning.
you not allow him to speak or remove him from the committee.
I agree.
I
agree.
Well, Mr.
I
Perkins,
agree.
you interrupted me.
Gentlemen, let's try to proceed with this. I would ask that Madame St-Clair Desgagnés be allowed to continue her questioning.
Yeah, she deserves to ask her questions. Come on.
I was interrupted a number of times. So you can ask your question again. And once you've concluded, I'll begin at 5 minutes.
À 5 minutes. Just attends, j'ai encore une point d'ordre.
Wait, there's another point of order.
Oh
Chair,
my
I think
God.
it's only fair that
I
Madame
can't. I gotta get coffee.
St-Clair gets her full 6 minutes at this point.
Well, Ms. Khalid is certainly going to, pardon me, Madame St-Clair va certainement
Ms. St-Clair Desgagnés will certainly have her 6 minutes, so you can ask your question again.
But the interruption is happening because of the numerous points of order, which are, as I said, a little thin about relevance, when I'm going to allow members, and always have, a lot of latitude. Vas-y, Madame St-Clair Desgagnés.
Je remercie.
I'd like to thank my colleague opposite, and especially Mr. Drouin, for his mansplaining on the topic of study. Let's continue. Ms. Batul followed you to CIBC, and I received as information that you had a number of meetings with her while she was Chief of Staff at SDTC. You say it's not the case, that you maybe met her once or twice, but that's contrary to the information I've received.
Confirmer avec vous.
I'd like to confirm with you.
As I've said before, I may have met her a few times. I don't recall the specific number of times. Again, SDTC is an arm's length organization where the management oversees the day-to-day operation.
Merci. Merci.
Thank you. Thank you. When you say a number of times, is this once or twice, or is it more like 10 or 15? To give an idea.
Again, I can't put a specific number on it. It was over 6 years ago. I dealt with a number of people during my tenure as a minister. And so as a minister,
D'accord. Merci.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Have you participated?
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Bains. Did you participate in her hiring at CIBC?
Again, I'm here to talk about
If you didn't know her.
Development Technology Canada and any questions you have pertaining to that.
Mes questions, c'est mon temps.
My questions, it's my time. I can ask you questions about the fact that you may have been a part of the hiring process for Ms. Batul. And if you didn't know her or hardly knew her, why did you participate? Did you push for her hiring at CIBC?
Vous allez voir où je vais en venir.
You'll see where I'm going. It has a relation with SDTC, so please answer.
Yeah, as I said, I'm more than pleased to answer any questions pertaining to Sustainable Development Technology Canada.
Monsieur le Président,
That's
j'arrive.
not an answer.
Mr. Chair, I'm getting to SDTC. I'm asking questions that are related to SDTC.
Yeah, make him answer the question.
Please ask your question again. So for the third time, I ask if you participated in the hiring process, the recruitment process for Ms. Batul at CIBC following your meetings with her as Chief of Staff of SDTC.
So as I've mentioned, I met with Ms. Batul when I was a minister. I don't recall the number of times specifically. And as I've also highlighted, Sustainable Development Technology Canada.
Merci.
Stop
Donc,
saying it so slow.
Donc, vous pouvez pas...
You're
So
filibustering.
you can't say that the fact that you met her beforehand when she was Chief of Staff at SDTC influenced your decision to bring her to CIBC afterward. You deny that it was related. Your work with her, your meetings with her when she was at SDTC have nothing to do with the fact that she went and worked with you at CIBC.
As I've mentioned before,
We don't care what you've mentioned before. Answer the freaking
management
question.
oversees the day-to-day operations at Sustainable Development Technology
God.
Canada, which is an arm's length organization.
Merci,
And my
mais
sole
vous...
Thank you, but you're not answering the question. It's a pretty simple question. Did your meetings with Ms. Batul when she was Chief of Staff at SDTC have an impact on your recruitment of Ms. Batul at CIBC? This is a question you can answer with yes or no, please, Mr. Bains.
It's an arm's length organization that oversees SDTC, and my responsibility as a minister was to appoint 7 of the 15 board members.
Just shut up and answer the question, man.
Je pense que je ne...
I don't think I'll obtain an answer from you on this, so I'll move to the next topic. A question that came up earlier. Who encouraged you to hire or name Ms. Verschuren? Was it someone internal to the department?
With respects to the individual, Ms. Verschuren, as you know, she had an impeccable track record. She was appointed by Stephen Harper
Ouais,
in
j'ai demandé qui...
2006.
I asked who. Who? Was it, for example, Andrew Noseworthy who encouraged you to hire her? Mr. Noseworthy, did he have anything to do with that process?
There was a new process established in 2016 that was open to all Canadians, and it's an
Point of order,
open.
Mr. Chair.
Oh my God.
Even
Khalid
though
with the
I'm
10th
sitting
point of
quite far
order.
away from my conservative colleagues, I heard one of them call Mr. Bains a liar, which I think is not only disrespectful but also goes against our standing orders.
On the same point of order.
Yes, Mr. Brock.
I'm sitting with my conservative colleagues. I heard no such thing. But more importantly, I laugh at
You
many
laughed
things.
at it.
I laugh at many things. I didn't laugh at that because I didn't
You
hear
laughed
it.
at it.
Chair, on that same point of order, I'm actually getting quite frustrated. I'm sure other members are getting frustrated at the obvious attempts of this particular witness, a former Minister of the Crown, who is deliberately wasting time, not answering a direct question that's put to him, repeating the same talking lines over and over again.
Thank you.
From the same testimony
Mr.
that
Brock,
he gave at Industry on June the 5th, 2004.
Chair?
I'm asking the chair to interject and get this witness to answer the question.
Point of order, Chair.
Just one. I've got a couple.
Oh my God, Khalid,
lined up
shut
here.
up.
Mr. Cooper. I think you. Did you have a point of order you want to make? No. Okay, Ms.
I
Ms.
would
Kelly?
appreciate if Mr. Cooper would apologize to Mr. Bains for calling him a liar. We all know that when witnesses come to this committee, they are under obligation to be truthful, and I know for a fact that Mr. Bains, through his, not just his ministry, but also through the work he's done throughout his entire life, he's been a truthful and principled person. And I take personal exception.
Thank you.
I take personal exception. I take personal exception not only to members in the Conservatives laughing right now, but also to somebody who is an innocent person being maligned by the Conservatives,
all right.
and this is their go-to, their motto.
Why don't I hear from Mr. Cooper now?
Of hearing time and time again. This is absolutely unreasonable, Chair.
Thank you.
Well, on the same point of order, perhaps Mr. Bains can apologize to taxpayers for $400 million.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen,
Retract those comments.
Okay. All right.
That happened when he was the minister.
I'm not in a position to.
Standing Order 117 says that, you have an authority to maintain order, but anything related to.
My job is to according to the order. According to so the standing orders lay out my role, which is to attempt to maintain order and hopefully succeed that. In terms of any kind of censure, that needs to be reported to the House if you wish to pursue it. I'm going to go back to Madame Sinclair Desgagnés, s'il vous plaît. Vous avez la parole pour.
You have the floor for about 2 minutes. Dear colleagues, we're trying to do our work, and I think this witness is key to the whole study of SDTC, so I'd like for him to answer the questions that are specific and that there is an end to the interruptions to questions. I'm just trying to do my work here. So, Mr. Noseworthy, did he have anything to do with the selection process of Ms. Verschuren? Yes or no?
There is a panel that was set up as part of this new.
Est-ce que Monsieur Noseworthy
was Mr. Noseworthy on that panel?
ou dans la sélection du
Or in the selection of the panel?
The Privy Council office and included the relevant departments.
D'accord? Encore une
Yes
fois.
or no?
Okay, once again, was Mr. Noseworthy part of that panel or part of the selection of that panel?
I don't recall the specific members of the panel. I do know that the Privy Council office led the panel.
Y a-t-il moyen que vous ayez accès,
Is there a way for you to access that information? If so, can you send it to us, to the committee,
s'il vous plaît?
please?
You're asking about the panel composition?
Oui.
Yes, please.
Yeah, my understanding is the Privy Council office will be speaking on this matter, and I believe they will have the relevant information that you have requested.
Parfait.
Perfect. Because I don't think I'm telling you anything new. Mr. Noseworthy was in a situation of a conflict of interest. He knew Ms. Verschuren. He was friends with her. So even in selecting the board of directors, there could have been favoritism. And as minister responsible, you could have seen all of that and act accordingly. So my question is the following. When you made your announcement with great fanfare, $46 million in January 2020, of the 14 companies that were funded 4 years ago, if you don't remember things 8 years ago, maybe you'll remember things 4 years ago, 5 companies received COVID money without being analyzed on a case-by-case basis. So one was not eligible. So nearly half of the companies that you were proud to fund were not really eligible. What does that mean to you today? Or do you feel absolutely no regret about everything you did as minister responsible for this type of situation?
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much for your question.
Decisions that were made by the management and the board were independent. And as I had mentioned, it's an arm's length organization, and there are clear rules in place to determine how these funds should be dispersed, and those rules needed to be followed.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Suivant, Mr. Desjardins, you have the floor for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much, Mr. Bains, for being present in this important work. As you're likely aware, the work of public accounts is one that looks at Auditor General's reports, an independent office that has found a way to verify specific instances of very serious issues related to public trust and related to the accountability that's needed to Canadians in regards to potential breaches of the Act, to which I hope you can help clarify. The Auditor General's report, page 6, her overall message is that they found, quote, significant lapses in Sustainable Development Technology Canada's governance and stewardship of public funds. It goes on to suggest that the Board of Directors of Sustainable Development Technology Canada did not ensure that the foundation complied with its enabling legislation. Mr. Bains, are you aware of the enabling legislation of SDTC?
Are you referring to the legislation that was passed by the House of Commons?
Yes.
Yeah, that is the act that ultimately determines the role of the minister to appoint members to Sustainable Development Technology Canada.
And who was the minister between the time of 2015 and 2021?
As I stated in my opening remarks, in 2015 November, I took on the role at ISED, and I left on January the 12th of 2021.
Much for that, Mr. Bains. So you would agree that you were the minister responsible at the time for compliance of the Act during that period of time?
As I indicated in my opening remarks, the role of the minister is to appoint 7 of the 15 board members to this organization, which is independent and it is arm's length.
And just so that people are aware, did you in fact appoint those members? Did you appoint the satisfactory amount required by the board?
I believe there were a number of appointments that were made during my tenure.
Did you, or were you aware that the board had supported reducing that number to 2?
Could you repeat that in terms of the board did?
Of course. No, I'm happy to repeat, Mr. Bains.
Yeah.
No, Mr. Bains, I'm happy to repeat this and to clarify this for you. Perhaps it's easier if I can ask whether or not you've read the Auditor General's report.
I did read the report.
Okay, Mr. Bains, if you read the report, it suggests in that report that the minister is required to appoint the satisfactory amount of board members. After that period of time, and I'll give you the benefit of the doubt to suggest that maybe you did in fact do the work needed as the minister responsible to appoint the satisfactory amount. The issue that the Auditor General is pointing out is the fact that the board was then reduced to 2 people. These 2 people, including Ms. Verchuren, would go on, and it would be difficult during their tenureship at that time of the board. They would go on to find or engage in direct conflicts of interest, which the Auditor General has found to be pertinent to many, many companies, including her own company that had received government funds. And this is the crux of the issue, Mr. Bains, and one that I think Canadians want serious attention to, and one that they need real accountability to. And I understand that you have to get going in 5 minutes, and this is going to be probably my last round to ask questions, and I do appreciate you being here. I don't necessarily appreciate the lack of answers, but that's your prerogative. My prerogative is to ask the questions. Your prerogative is to answer them, and if you don't want to answer them or haven't read the report, that's completely up to you, and that's the sense I'm getting at this point. But I think you'd understand the issue that I have and Canadians have and the Auditor General has. You're responsible as a minister to ensure that the enabling legislation to which you are minister responsible for is followed, and at that time was appropriately enforced. The Auditor General is pointing out a very serious fact, Mr. Bains, that during your tenureship, that did not happen. In addition to these very serious concerns, Mr. Bains, there was a very legitimate issue that you were responsible for, which was the attendance of an Assistant Deputy Minister named Mr. Andrew Noseworthy within your ministry. Mr. Andrew Noseworthy was you were directly his supervisor, directly responsible for him. You've met Mr. Noseworthy, correct?
Mr. Noseworthy did work at ISED.
And you met him, right?
That is correct. Yes, I had met with Mr. Noseworthy.
And you had many conversations with Mr. Noseworthy, I presume.
Several conversations over my tenure during minister at ISED.
And I appreciate that, Mr. Bains. And one of the issues that we found with Mr. Noseworthy was that he didn't know what his job was. And what kind of boss, in this case the minister, would have an employee, a very senior executive employee, assistant deputy minister, who the Auditor General had to unfortunately describe as someone who didn't know their job or didn't know their roles or responsibilities, to be exact, in relation to the fact that they were present. This person, one of your staff members, was present in the decision-making process of a board of 2 people that ended up giving themselves millions of dollars. That's a serious concern, Mr. Bains, and one that Canadians are upset about. It's harmed the very real and legitimate policy of ensuring Canadians get access to innovation funding for small and medium-sized businesses. And I'd encourage my colleagues to take this issue far more seriously than we have today, because there's a very likely fact, which is Mr. Andrew Noseworthy knew that he was likely going to find himself in a position where maybe he had to report to you as the minister responsible for what he had heard at the 2-person board meeting he was at. At any point in time, do you think he was ever going to question whether or not you would ask him what his roles and responsibilities are?
Thank you, Mr. Desjardins. It is my intention to get through a truncated additional round, so I'm going to cut you off there. We're going to have government and official opposition members will have 4 minutes each. The 2 remaining parties will have 2 minutes each. Mr. Cooper, you have the floor for 4 minutes.
Yes,
thank you,
God.
Mr. Chair. Former Liberal Minister Bains, you led the committee to believe that you had no active role in the appointment of Ms. Verscheren beyond receiving a recommendation from the Prime Minister's Department, the PCO, as part of a so-called open, transparent, and merit-based process. You know that that isn't true, just as you knew it wasn't true when you misled committee in June. Isn't that right, former Liberal Minister Bains?
Thank you very much for the question. As I've highlighted before, Ms. Verscheren was appointed by Stephen Harper, Jim Flaherty, Christian
Former
Parody.
Liberal Minister Bains, let's follow the chronology of events leading to Ms. Verscheren's appointment, someone who was in a conflict of interest at the time that you appointed her. On March 15th, 2019...
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Ms. Kelley.
Is the former employer of the official opposition's wife out of order in calling Mr. Bains the names that he's calling him?
You in fact are up next, so you will have a 4-minute right to the floor at which you'll be able to take full use of it. Mr. Cooper, you have just over 3 minutes, please.
Former Liberal Minister Bains, let's follow the chronology of events leading to Ms. Verscheren's appointment. In September and October 2018, the PCO received 54 applications for chair of SDTC. On March 15, 2019, they provided you with a short list of 5 recommended candidates. That's the process you keep referencing. You sat on your hands. You ignored the recommendation of PCO. In April 2019, according to Ms. Verscheren, you called her. You asked her to serve as the chair of SDTC. All of a sudden, on April 30th of 2019, 1.5 months after you had a short list of 5 recommended candidates, she applies. And on May 21st, 2019, the PCO adds her name to the short list, and you thereafter appoint her. Do you really expect this committee and Canadians to believe that she was picked as part of a transparent, independent, merit-based process, and that you didn't have your hand involved in picking her? Is that what you want Canadians to believe?
It was an open, transparent, merit-based process, and as I've highlighted, former Prime Minister...
No, what happened here, what happened, former Liberal Minister Bains, is that you didn't follow the process. You didn't respect the process. You politically interfered in the process.
As I was trying to state before, Ms. Verscheren was appointed by Stephen Harper to the Canadian North American Competitiveness Council in 2006.
Did the other 5 recommended candidates have conflicts of interest with SDTC because Ms. Verscheren had a conflict of interest? What happened about the other 5 candidates?
Again, when we're speaking about Ms. Verscheren, I was highlighting the fact that she was appointed by Christian Parody, the former Minister to Science, Technology,
Mr. Bains,
and
you're not
Innovation
answering my
Council.
question. I asked you, did the other 5 candidates also have conflicts of interest? Because Ms. Verscheren had a conflict of interest at the time you appointed her. $12 million that her company was receiving from SDTC, and you knew about that.
Mr. Cooper, I have a point of
All
order.
public
With all due
office holders.
respect,
Sorry, Mr.
and
Bains.
I truly respect Mr. Cooper, but he's asking the witness to opine on some other members that were part of a board. I just don't know what what Mr. Bains can say. We know that the former employer of the leader's wife is asking tough questions.
This is not a point of
order.
Well, it is a tough
of order.
Well, it would be dismissed. It'd be thrown out of court if it was the real court. But this is a kangaroo court.
As government members are prone to remind this committee, we're not a court. This is a question and answer session. So,
thank you so much.
I've said that before many times because it is not a court. We're here to ask questions and receive answers. So, Mr. Cooper, you may proceed.
Mr. Bains, did the other 5 candidates have conflicts of interest as Ms. Verscheren did? Yes or no?
It's important to note that all public office holders must respect and follow the Conflict of Interest Act.
You were advised that Ms. Verscheren had a conflict of interest, and you appointed her anyway. I'm asking you about the other 5 candidates. You refuse to answer, and I take it that they didn't have conflicts of interest, and you appointed someone with a conflict because you don't give a damn about conflicts of interest. Isn't that right, former Liberal Minister Bains?
During my tenure, I made over 100 governor and council recommendations, and it's important that all those individuals that were recommended and ultimately appointed follow the Conflict of Interest Act.
You knew she had a conflict of interest. You didn't give a damn, and as a result, $400 million taxpayer dollars have gone out the door.
Mr. Cooper, I will just remind you that Mr. Cooper, I will remind you, as I was reminded today in the House, that we will use parliamentary language in this committee room. Ms. Khalid, you have the floor for 4 minutes, please.
Oh God, guys,
thank you
here
very
we
much,
go.
Chair. And I, as much as I appreciate my opposition colleagues trying to get their clips for the Russian Rebel News, I do have some serious questions to ask our witness here today.
All right. Yes, Mr. Yes, Mr. Brock.
Here we go again with
the
yet
Russian Rebel
another
News.
Liberal who is trying to associate
the
Conservative Party of Canada with the Russian administration.
Mr. Brock.
There were members in the House.
Mr. Brock, whoa. I did hear what was said by the member, and it has nothing to do with the Conservative Party. This is not a point of order, even if
Point of order,
was.
Mr. Chair?
I'm ruling in your side's favor. So I'm going to give the floor back to Ms. Khalid, unless you actually have a genuine new point of order.
Well, I would invite Mr. Brock to look at the FBI records.
No, stop. All right. We really don't want to go down in the U.S. politics or bring U.S. politics into this committee room. Ms. Khalid, you have the floor, please.
Half your cabinet isn't, though.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I'm just going to put some things on the record with respect to the topic that we are talking about today. And Mr. Bains, I really appreciate your patience with our opposition colleagues on everything that they've been hammering at you with today. So Prime Minister Mulroney asked that Ms. Verscheren serve on his National Science and Tech Committee, and Minister Flaherty tapped her as an economic advisor to serve on his Economic Council during the 2008 recession. And she's donated to the Simcoe Gray Conservative Association between 2013 to 2015. She's donated to Lisa Raitt.
What the hell does this have to do with Bains?
Since 2013 to the Conservative Party federally, and also donated to the last 2 leadership campaigns. Can you help me in understanding how partisanship works with these kind of appointments, please?
Thank you very much for the question. As I highlighted, it's important to note that in 2016, there was a new process that was put into place. And this process was designed to encourage all Canadians to apply to various positions that were made available to different organizations and agencies. And the Prime Minister or the Privy Council office basically led this panel with the various departments. They ultimately made recommendations and brought forward names to the minister. Then the minister would make a GIC recommendation. As been discussed before, the process was open, it was fair, it was transparent, and specifically with regards to Ms. Verschuren, as you can tell, she had worked with the previous government in different roles. She also received the Order of Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Bains.
She was a well-recognized CEO.
Thank you, Mr.
And
Bains.
so,
and I'm sure that you'll be able to provide all of the rest of what you were going to say in writing for the committee to understand and appreciate. And given that we've been talking, sorry, Mr. Perkins, I couldn't hear myself over your voice, but given that we've been talking about the Auditor General's report and everything that has been going on, I do want to move a motion right now on this topic, and that motion is that the committee reaffirm the independence of the Auditor General of Canada to conduct her work free from interference, and echo the concerns of the Auditor General of Canada regarding the Conservative Party House Order of June 10th, 2024, that ordering her office to produce her audit file on Sustainable Development Technology Canada to the law clerk and Parliamentary Council compromises her independence and is likely to discourage departments, agencies, and Crown corporations from providing free and timely access to information required for her audits to go forward. And Chair, I would love to talk more about this motion, but I do want to make sure that it's in order given the topic today.
Have you submitted the motion to the chair?
I'm about to. I read it into the record right now, Chair, but I'm more than happy to put it into in writing for all members as well.
So you don't have it in?
I don't have it in writing right now, but I can get it to you.
You should have had it in writing.
Would you like to suspend while we do that?
What's a point of privilege? This is new. Yes, Mr. Perkins.
I'd like to raise a point of privilege. And I would ask, as part of that point of privilege, because the witness has refused to answer questions, he has repeated one line consistently for an hour, and obviously written by PMO to try and protect from the corruption. So I would move the following motion as a point of privilege, that the committee instruct the clerk and analyst to prepare a report to the House, which the chair shall table forthwith, outlining the potential breach of privilege concerning Navdeep Bains' refusal to answer questions which the committee put to him.
All right, I'm going to consult with the clerk here. I'm going to suspend for a few minutes. And in the meantime, Ms. Khalid, if you could send it in
Speak about it as well.
Hold on, I'm going to suspend.
No, you don't get to filibuster. No, you should have had it in writing, honey. Too bad you don't read the Green Book.
I do not like to do this, but I can also see this is going to go on for a little bit. Mr. Bains, I'm going to excuse you because I know you had a.
Before that decision is made, I'd like to discuss that.
No. This I've got to suspend here to go over. I now have competing motions. Mr. Bains is on the clock. He made it very clear to me beforehand. Agree. No, I'm going to finish my thought here. I appreciate him coming. He was. I had also, through the clerk, discussed with him the possible and perhaps likely need that he might need to come back, and he is aware of that. So that is my ruling, Mr. Brock. Mr. Bains, you are excused. I appreciate you coming in, and I'm sure the clerk will reach out to you. Mr. Khalid Ms. Khalid had asked for some information, and if you could submit that to the clerk as well. In the meantime, I'm going to suspend just for about 3 minutes here, and if you could submit your motion.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you.
Okay. So what's going to happen here now is they're going to, because Khalid kind of shot herself in the foot if she was smart enough, what she wanted to do, what she really wanted to do, because you heard her ask it twice, she wanted to table a motion, which she didn't have prepared. That's shooting herself in the foot for the first time. And then the second is when she wanted to go and speak on it, because once you table a motion, you are allowed to speak, and there's actually no real time. You can speak for like a whole hour and just filibuster the rest of the committee. So that's basically what she was wanting to do. She was wanting to table a motion and then just speak to it and run the clock out. She didn't have her motion prepared, so she shot herself in the foot there. And then when she went to go speak on it, MP Perkins, as an experienced member who used to be a chair of a committee, was very, very quick to have his already in writing and has his ready to be tabled. So I think basically what's going to happen is whichever motion is given to the clerk first is which one is going to be debated on first and spoken on first. So I think Perkins actually beat her to the beat the race on that, even though he did it afterwards, because Khalid came unprepared and didn't have it in writing. So you need to have it in both, at least in English. You should have it in English and in French. MP Genuis is really good at that. He always has his motions pre-prepared. It's like, I think what MP Genuis does is he actually has probably about 3 or 4 motions prepared before he gets to the committee. And based on the way the committee goes and how questions are asked and answered is which one he goes forward with. And he always has it ready in English and in French. It doesn't need to be translated, and they get to it right away. He's very good at that. Brock usually doesn't table motions, but when he does, he at least has it in English, and Perkins as well. So Khalid shot herself in the foot there, not having it in both official languages, or at least in one, and not having it in writing. So sorry, honey, but you need to read the Green Book. I mean, it's you've been in office for almost 10 years now, and you still don't even know how to table a motion properly in a committee. It's ridiculous, to say the least. And this whole committee has been just a giant filibuster. Guys, what number are we at? I think somebody said 22 or 23 points of orders. Does anybody know how many it's been? But while we're waiting for this for a couple minutes, let's see if there's another committee we can tune into for a sec. I want to see what the NV committee's doing. Okay, nothing going on here. Let's see what trade's doing.
Mr. Martel, please.
Nothing really going on here.
Madam Chair, thank you for being here with us today. Ms. Vega.
$19 was the last number. I counted 20. I counted 21. Yeah, just ridiculous, man. Like, and like over 50% of them weren't even points of orders. It was debate. For sakes, man. I could table a motion better than Khalid. I'm pretty sure most of us in this chat could do a better job at being in committee than Khalid could. And it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous to see. Let's check natural resources. Maybe they're doing something interesting.
Chicago, Colorado, California, about what you knew and when you knew it. So I'd like to ask you, Mr. McKenzie, I read you the California indictment. It's fascinating. I'm sure you should read it. It said the defendants, that's your industry, could have refrained from undermining the global effort to mitigate the impacts of GHG emissions, or contributed to practical technical strategies that would have allowed them to continue their business ventures while supporting a transition to a low carbon future. Nah, you weren't going to do that, right? Instead, defendants devoted significant efforts to deceive consumers, deceive lawmakers and the public about the existential hazards of burning fossil fuels. And that you knew back in the 1970s and 80s the exact kind of catastrophe that our children are living now. And so here you are again. This is like the big tobacco moment. You could come here and you could say, you know, yes, we have a responsibility, and yes, we're going to mitigate. But no, you're blowing smoke in our face, saying you're not going to want an emissions cap, saying it's the public's responsibility to work with you if we want to lower emissions, and you won't even release your environmental reports. You're keeping them secret. Simple question. What do you say to my children and your children and our grandchildren that they're going to live on a burnt planet because you were too busy making money hand over fist to even come and do responsibility for addressing the crisis that your industry has caused?
Mr. McKenzie, I'll say just a short answer. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, thank you for your question. I think what we've said, Mr. Angus, and we recognize we're 25% of Canadian emissions, and we've given, through the Pathways Alliance, we think a path forward on how we can reduce that.
But you haven't reduced. You've continued to increase emissions. Everyone else has done their part.
Time
you
is
continue
up.
to rise, and it's a lot higher
Mr.
than 25%. So
I just want to get Mr. McKenzie to finish. Mr. McKenzie, in like 5-10 seconds, please wrap up.
I think the only thing that we were trying to highlight, Mr. Angus, is this is a very complex issue that requires not just environmental lens and perspective, but it also requires an economic, political, geopolitical lens as well. And we need complex solutions for complex problems.
Thank you, Mr. McKenzie and Mr. Spruill, for coming to committee today and testifying. If you
More pipelines, baby. Build. All right, the other committee's still on suspension. We'll go back to listen to this.
We'll now suspend and get our next panel set up.
Chair, I'd like to ask for UC to ask a question.
We're suspended.
They can block it. That's fine, but I want to ask.
I already called it, Mike.
Well, it looks like, there's not just one committee, but a few committees in a gong show today. Let's go watch international trade while we wait.
Momentum for female entrepreneurship in Canada. Would you say that what the government is doing is not as effective as one may think?
I think to a certain degree I would disagree with that. I do think that our statistics of, startups, creation are really picking up now. So perhaps that cycle has started to bottom out and started to increase, right? I think that there's a lot of programs that the government has implemented that have a good track record of success. But as I said, the cycles in our industry are very, very long. So from the moment that you raise a fund for you to deploy and return that capital, it takes a decade, right? So I think that the statistics are showing that women entrepreneurs are starting to, really pick that up. We'll see some results in the next few years.
Madame Vega, regardez, parce qu'il me reste pas, regarde, même...
Ms. Vega, I know I don't have much more time, but even with the existing initiatives, access to funding for female entrepreneurs is a major challenge in Canada. Do you think that existing programs do not effectively target the sectors in which women need support? For example...
Okay, not a very interesting committee. Nothing to really see here. We can check the Women's Committee. What are they on about today?
Generous with,
okay, thank you. Thank you to all the witnesses for being here today. And Kimberly, I'm replacing Mark Saray, and he was very disappointed that he wasn't here today. He's out of town. So thank you for being here, and I'm sending along Mark's gratitude as well for you being here. I think we've lost Dr. Seeley, unfortunately. There's a doctor at McMaster, Dr. Juliet Daniel, who's doing incredible research on XXX breast cancer in Black women. And I think it was Dr. Seeley who mentioned that women who get XXX breast cancer are more likely to die. I visited Dr. Daniel's lab and met with her team. She's underfunded in her research, so I'm not surprised by what we're hearing today about Black women, Indigenous women, non-Caucasian women being excluded from.
Okay, they're talking about cancer. I can't listen to that. Are we back on yet? Come on. No, it's been more than 3 minutes. What the heck are they doing? They're still trying to decide if Khalid can write down her motions. It's probably taking too long to write. Let's see what the actual House is doing.
Prime Minister was in breach of conflict of interest rules. While in office, he used his position to get VIP treatment from foreign officials in violation of ethics laws. He did it again during the We Charity scandal, funneling nearly $1 billion into an organization that employed members of his family and members of the finance minister's family also. And who could forget SNC-Lavalin, where the government spent more months inappropriately pressuring the Attorney General to give preferential treatment to a big, powerful...
Okay, as much as I really want to watch MP Lanceman, they're back on.
All things back into order. So I have two motions on the floor, and I don't have the first motion yet to the clerk to disseminate for discussion. So, Mr. Perkins, I'm going to turn to you. You have the floor on your motion, please.
Told you Perkins is going to get his motion
Chair.
first.
Point of
order.
Just 1 second, Mr. Perkins. I have a point of order from Mr. Erskine Smith.
Can we? I'm a bit confused as to the traditional path here is you move the first motion that is moved, and it was read into the record. The interpreters interpreted it for us, so we've got it in both official languages. And I would like to hear from the clerk as to what the proper process is, because this is backwards as far as anything I've seen in 10 years.
Mr. Genuis, you have a point of order.
Yeah. So just. Respectfully, to clarify the rules for my my honourable friend, Ms. Khalid, if you'd like to speak on this point of order, you can propose to do so.
Would you like to do the chair's job for him?
You're welcome to continue heckling. I suppose I'll just ignore you, I guess. But just for the members that are interested in knowing, the process is that when there is a question
point of order,
privilege.
Mr. Chair.
The chair
can make the own rules.
I
love
on
Mr. Garnett,
the question
but he
of
doesn't
privilege.
need to explain this to the committee.
Another rule, Mr. Duran, is you don't speak unless you're recognized, even if you think you have a point of order, which you don't.
On that point of order, Chair.
All right. All right.
On
Look.
that point of order, Chair.
What is wrong with you?
Mr. Genuis, please.
We have 4 members in this committee right now. We have a 5th one who has come in and is now on the speaking order. I'm not sure who he's subbing or who he's replacing here.
Just for the Liberal members, there's a green book. You can get it for free. That explains the rules. So what Mr. Perkins has done is he's raised a question of privilege.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
The chair
Mr.
then,
Garnett has been subbed in for
if
another
he
member?
considers it a matter dealing with privilege,
Has he been subbed in for another
then
member?
privilege
Just 1
supersedes.
second, Mr. Genuis. If you could, your whip will sub in your members as requested.
I'd like to know who he's replacing.
It's none of your fucking business.
Because we
Shut
have
the hell up.
So,
Shut up and let him speak.
Yes.
It's his time.
It's been many times in this committee we've come to this point, I believe, Chair. I think we can reflect in the last 3 years. There's been moments where this kind of disruption's taken place in the past, but there's 2 concerns that I think are really important while we have this, whatever this is. One is I think the interpreters, if we can find a way to make this as easy as possible for them, that's great. Second, a speaking list maybe could be instituted by you, Mr. Chair. I don't want to tell you how to do your job. Certainly not. That's what I'm saying. Just that perhaps the speaking order or speaking list could help us to predict when we should speak and when some people shouldn't. Thank you.
So you're absolutely right, and I am hearing points of order right now. I just heard from Mr. Erskine Smith, and Mr. Genuis has the floor. Mr. Genuis had informed me before. I was expecting him to speak on his other motion, which he's not doing, but you have the floor, Mr. Genuis, on the point of order.
Yes, sorry. I was just responding to the point of order from Mr. Erskine Smith, and I hope this is helpful. I'm not trying to start a needless conflict. It's just that we're all guided by rules, and those rules are well established. That when there's a question of privilege, that much as is happening in the House right now, that supersedes other business. So if the chair rules that it is a matter touching on privilege, then that supersedes the other matters. To Mr. Erskine Smith's point, it's not as if someone just moved a motion on another topic. It has unique status as a privilege motion. So again, I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Kelly, do you have a point of order, or is it moot now?
I'm just, wondering if you've been satisfied by Mr. Genuis doing your and the clerk's job for you.
He's not.
Mr. Chair, I would also entertain the fact that a point of privilege was raised on whether or not a question was answered, and I don't recall in any committee in 9 years as to the quality of responses that we were provided at any committee in the past 9 years, 20 years, 15 years, 30 years, and so on and so on and so on, the quality of answers are not a question of privilege, and I would divert to you, Mr. Williamsons, for the answer.
Arrive scam. Christian first.
Thank you very much.
I just also want another point
No,
of
hold
order,
on.
Chair.
I've got as Mr. Usually said, I have several points of order. I believe Mr. Erskine-Smith in a second, but I'm going to hear Mr. Perkins first.
So the confusion here, and it started with a legitimate question by MP Erskine-Smith about a motion that was moved by Ms. Khalid, and then I moved and put forward a privilege motion about whether, I think the question was that you could, whether you can do those two things at the same time. And the precedent was set, the precedent was set in 2020 in FINA on a similar item when there was a motion on the floor. And then our current leader, Mr. Poilievre, moved a question of privilege during it because a question of privilege takes precedent over everything else. MP Khalid's asked if we could circulate my motion of privilege. It's been sent to the clerk, so hopefully we can get that out. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Erskine-Smith.
Okay, so I think I've got it clear then. So if there's a legitimate motion for privilege, that will take precedence. In this particular case, that seems unlikely, but that's the process as far as it goes. Not I've got it clear. The condescension is not needed, Garnett, but it's nice to hear from you.
I was more responding. Thank you. I might, Ms. Kelly, did you have a point of order, or you? No. Okay, Madame Sinclair Desgagnés, s'il vous plaît.
Sir, Ms. Sinclair Desgagnés, simply to ask if we could suspend until we have the privilege motion in both official languages. That would be very helpful so that our teams can look at the French version, please.
I will. I'm going to suspend for 2 or 3 minutes.
Oh, my Lord. I have watched hundreds of committees, especially public accounts, especially OGO, FINA, Envy. I've watched so many committees, and I've never seen something get this out of order. Like, even when Khalid was dropping the swear words in that one committee, and they just totally shut the committee down, this has been such a gong show. Holy crap, I'm going to do some drinking after watching this. Like, this is ridiculous. Oh, I'd love to have a beer right now while watching this crap, but I don't think YouTube lets me do that. I don't know. Jeez, man. Like, they're all adults here. I know some of the Liberals are acting like children, but let's get the business done. You guys are paid $200,000 each, plus a stipend for being on committee. It's like $30,000 or $40,000 extra just for being a part of a committee because it's extra work. So let's do the work that Canadians are expecting you to do. If you need to vote on a motion, let's vote to it. Let's not point of order over another point of order on top of 3 other points of orders. Like, holy smokes, man. Oh. Let's just see. Let's go back to see if MP Landsman is speaking. So while we get something to.
And that want answers.
Yeah,
from
she's
him.
still on. Perfect.
And it's clear that there's only one avenue left. The government clearly does not care about the Ethics Commissioner or the Auditor General because they disregard them so often. There used to be something called ministerial accountability in this place. And when ministers are in scandals, they either get promotions, they're kept in cabinet, they're shuffled to a different role where maybe they're out of the spotlight for a little bit, but nobody ever faces consequences. Yeah. And it's obvious that that extends to their disrespect for Parliament too. So it's time to call in the big guns, the RCMP. They should turn over the documents to the RCMP. If this happened in any business, then you wouldn't have to go to some committee you would turn everything you had over to the cops, especially if you're telling Canadians that you have nothing to hide, especially if you're boasting, like the Minister of Science boasts every day in this House, that he has had 4 investigations on this. And yet they're refusing to provide documents. And their arguments change as the days go on. First, it was some charter violation, some weird argument of a charter violation, which is questionable because there are some ministries that turned over documents. So it's only charter violations if you don't want them to see the documents that have something really bad in them. I'm going to say this very slowly so that people at home understand that the charter is there to protect people from the government, and it is not there to protect the Liberals from giving almost $400 million to their friends.
Hear, hear.
Their story changed again. Well, the cops don't
Thank you, Mr. G, by the way, appreciate that.
Documents. I think that's the latest refrain. Or that Parliament doesn't have to do that because the cops don't want all of the documents. If you have nothing to hide, then turn over the documents. But I'm sure there is something to hide, because we wouldn't be in the 7th day of speaking at length about this very motion. An obstruction, a defiance of a speaker's...
I'll bring the meeting back into order. So after discussing with the chair, reviewing some of the standing orders, and also reviewing some precedent, I am going to recognize Mr. Perkins' motion as a privilege motion. Now, first, the first step is that you're flagging and I'll come to you in just one second, Mr. Erskine-Smith. Why don't you hear what I have to say, and then we can have, I'm sure, points of order discussions about it. So, well, possibly. I lost, and so. I'm going to uphold that your belief that you believe your privileges have been infringed upon, which then triggers your motion. So I will turn to you, Mr. Perkins, to now speak to your motion.
Told you.
Thank you, Mr.
Get
Chair.
some, Khalid.
The reason I
Told
moved
you.
this for all of those who are watching, part of this process of being accountable to Parliament is for witnesses to actually answer the questions that we pose. And I'll go through a series of some of the questions that were asked that I'm aware of, and I'm sure others may add a little more to it, that were very simple questions put to the former Liberal minister, but he refused to answer them and basically kept repeating the lines in his opening statement, the same line over and over again, as if he were some sort of
robot
automatron or something.
Yeah.
So I started by asking him if he had called and spoken with Annette Verschuren twice. Very simple question. He refused to answer that. He talked about the appointments process. And I said, well, Ms. Verschuren testified before committee that you had called twice. Is she right or you? And he talked about the appointments process. I then, after obviously some frustration and interruptions, went on to another area. I asked him, did he appoint Andre Lise-Matteau in 2016? And he went on about the appointments process and wouldn't say yes or no on somebody. He's on the record.
Thank you so much, Gocho. Donnie, really appreciate you.
Not he is on the record, it's public record. Then I pointed out the fact that while she was on the board under his watch, that $114 million went to her companies. Was he aware of that? And he talked about the good work of SDTC, didn't talk about whether he's knowledgeable. I said, your assistant deputy minister was in those meetings, Mr. Noseworthy. You must have been informed about that. And he basically said it's a fair and open process. I then went on to ask him about the $750 million that he gave. I should say that before I asked that, I asked in the 25 times that current Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault was lobbying in the year before he was elected, while he was a nominated candidate, that he was lobbying his office on the public record, the lobbyist registry, for Cycle Capital.
Oh, you guys, man, you're being so nice.
For Cycle Capital
Thank
Fund
you,
number
guys.
4, whether or not he remembered those meetings. And he basically talked about the open appointments process, and he can't be remembered, shouldn't have to remember everything in his life. And then I said, okay, so those meetings were about, as in the registry, meeting with you, of getting money from EDC, and EDC gave $145 million. Do you remember that? And he talked about the activities of SDTC, not about that process to get money. Then I asked about the fact that after all of this corruption that was going on within the fund, his appointment of a conflicted chair, his appointment of board members that were conflicted, like Andre Lise-Mateau, the fact that he had officials in the meeting, every single meeting, where 82% of the time they were voting themselves taxpayer money, why he would take and give $750 million and get cabinet approval to give $750 million more only a month before he left the job to go work at CIBC.
Guys, stop.
$750 million more taxpayer money for this fund when there were clearly management issues. And he again talked about the appointments process. Now, that's just my questions. There were some excellent questions from MP Cooper around the 5 appointments that he made, and whether or not he recalled any of them and whether any of them were conflicted. And he talked about the PCO appointments process. I'm sure some of my colleagues will come up with some other lists, but the member from the bloc brought forward a new revelation that Amber Bettal, the VP at SDTC, for his time there, she worked there for 5 years, and when he was at CIBC, he left, joined CIBC, and guess what? Guess who gets up and starts working at CIBC in the investment banking area where I believe he was? And it is the same person who was working at SDTC. He claims to know nobody and nothing that went on. So time after time after time, when we asked about individual appointments, when we asked about money, when we asked about the reporting of his assistant deputy minister to him, when we asked about whether or not he did a basic thing like a phone call to a prospective chair of the fund, he didn't say, I don't remember. In most cases, he repeated his opening statement line of an open process and that people applied. He totally ignored every single question that opposition parties asked. Unfortunately, we don't know if he ignored questions of the government members because government members didn't ask any. So that's why we have a breach of privilege. There has to be an attempt by the witness to actually answer the question, not repeat a line that's been written for him and ignore the question totally in order to facilitate the further cover-up of the cover-up of these documents and the refusal of the government to turn over the documents to the House. They're clearly hiding things. They're clearly hiding more corruption. And this Liberal minister and the current Liberal minister, but this one started the process, and the current minister who's been asleep at the switch for 40 months and didn't do anything till it was made public in the media, and still hasn't done anything really because it's still SDTC. It's just got 3 bureaucrats running it now as opposed to Liberal board members. So he didn't answer any questions. He is obstructing the work of this committee.
Thank you so much,
and our study of the corruption into SDTC, and we need to send a report to the Speaker for the House to deal with this breach of our privilege.
And I agree with Perkins there.
Thank you,
I really
Mr.
agree.
Perkins. I have a long list. Mr. Erskine-Smith, you have the floor next.
Yeah. Before I get to any kind of response, because at the end of the day, Mr. Bains said a couple of times, I don't recall an answer, and Mr. Perkins just glided by that as if that's not a sufficient answer when it was 8 years ago. And of course, it is an answer. Whether he might not like it, but it's an answer. So, like, we don't have to be children about it. That's an obvious answer. The second part of this, though, is Chair, you yourself said he may well come back. So this is premature and then some. But I would love to hear you, Mr. Chair, said based on precedent. So what's the precedent? Walk us through. When you've got a witness who isn't even done their testimony yet, there's a privilege motion. I would love to hear from the clerk, and I would love to hear from you. Walk me through why you ruled that this is an acceptable privilege motion. What's the precedent? Because this is a terrible precedent to set.
No, it's not. Read the Green Book.
Mr. Erskine-Smith, at this point, I'm not part of the debate, so...
No. But what's the precedent? You said there's precedent, so what's the precedent?
Well, most recently, in January, there was a ruling that involved Mr. Fursk in his unwillingness to answer questions. That's all I'm going to say because I'm not part of the debate.
Yeah, can I just raise a point of order?
That's the precedent that you're pointing to, Chair. That's the precedent.
Can I just raise a point of order?
That is a laughable joke. That's an absolute joke.
Whoa, come on. He's calling the chair a joke.
Sorry, Mr. Durant, you have a point of order.
Yeah, just again.
Yeah, sorry, I do.
Well, just one, Mr. Durant, just one second. If you have a point of order, you need to say point of order, because otherwise I assume you're looking to speak to the motion. So I didn't. Sorry. So Mr. Durant first, and I'll recognize you, Mr. Genuis.
As well as I appreciate, 2, 4, 6 members of Conservative Party on the other side. I do appreciate that, but there has to be some form of decorum, and I believe if you look at the book, I still don't know whether or not Mr. Genius was actually subbed in, and I will refer you to Bosque and Gagnon, Chapter 20, when members serve on subcommittees or as substitutes for regular members, they enjoy all the rights of regular members. They are counted for purposes of quorum. They may participate in debate. They may move motions and vote, and if required, they may submit a notice of motion. To this minute, I still do not know, because I'm looking at Mr. Nader, I'm looking at Mr. Perkins, I'm looking at Mr. Cooper, I'm looking at Mr. Brock, I'm looking at Mr. Stewart, and I'm now looking at Mr. Genius, which does not reflect the decorum of this particular committee.
Point of order.
He is a genius.
So
it's
again,
genuous,
I'll refer you to the Chapter 20. I would like a ruling on that, and I would like to know whether or not Mr. Genius has actually been...
Mr. Genius.
Pardon my French, but Mr.
Genuine.
On the same point, Chair.
If he was subbed in at this committee.
Mr. Genuis first.
It's on the same point.
No,
Chair.
but yeah. All right, I'm going to go to Mr. Nader on the first.
Just to clarify, the standing orders are clear on this matter. Refer the members to Standing Order 119. Any member of the House who is not a member of a standing special legislative committee may, unless the House or the committee considered otherwise orders, take part in the public proceedings of the committee, but may not move or vote or move any motion, nor be part of any quorum. Any members can participate. It's very clear. Standing Order 119. That's how we govern ourselves. This has been debated in other committees. It's been dealt with. It's in the Standing Orders, Chair.
Thank you. Is your on this issue, Mr. Genuis, or?
Yeah. So,
play ball? Yes,
I mean, like,
just one. I do want, Mr. Durant, those are the standing orders that we govern ourselves. It is why occasionally we do have Green Party members that come to this committee and that participate with witnesses.
It is clause by clause.
And do participate. Mr. Genuis, you have the floor, please.
Yeah. Yeah, so just, Chair, like, again, respectfully to members, there are rules that are well established. I think the House of Commons does provide training opportunities for members who are interested in digging further into them. When it comes, so I think Mr. Nader dealt very well with the one maybe misunderstanding that's at the table. The other issue is that when a question of privilege is raised at committee, it is not for the chair to rule that, yes, privilege was broken. It's for the chair to determine whether or not it's a matter touching on privilege. It's for the committee to determine itself through a privilege motion. In the same way that in the House, when a question is raised, the Speaker does not determine whether there's been a violation of privilege. The Speaker determines whether there is a prima facie case that there's been a violation of privilege, at which point there is a privilege motion that's been made. But members seem to be surprised that it is considered a matter of privilege when witnesses don't answer questions. There is a massive amount of jurisprudence verifying this. The Winnipeg Labs document issue began when a witness refused to answer a question. The issues with Mr. Firth were privilege relating to a failure to answer questions. There was an issue with Min Doan where a question of privilege was raised regarding his failure to answer a question. The chair ruled that it was touching on a matter of privilege, although the committee voted against proceeding with the motion. So there are mountains of jurisprudence on this, and again, I think I'm not trying to be snarky at all. Like there's training available, there are documents established, and members can read the books. They can avail themselves of those training opportunities.
Mr. Chair, with all due respect, can you refer to the clerk with an adult conversation as opposed to kid conversation?
Thank you, Mr. Durain. All right, yeah, Mr. Durain, your comments reflect more on you than this committee or the chair. So you're welcome to conduct yourself. You have a right to be here. I'm going to continue now the debate. Mr. Brock, you have the floor, please.
And relinquish my time. Thank you.
Mr. Cooper, you have the floor. Mr. Durain, you have the floor, please.
So all of these questions were actually asked at the previous committee 4 or 5 months ago, and actually I can read it into the record, but I won't for your own sake, Mr. Perkins, because it would make you look, whatever. I'm just the quality of answers doesn't pertain to a question of privilege, and that's my issue. They're trying to fish for something, and they have been trying. The pattern of the Conservative Party is not about finding the truth. It's about stalling what is happening in the House, and we can see it. There's already a question of privilege in the House right now. There's another one on the docket. And on this side of the House, unlike Mr. Brock, who is a lawyer and would be disbarred from the Law Society of Ontario if he would speak publicly like this, because he simply doesn't. It questions me, what kind of Crown attorneys do we have in Ontario when this man was able to serve, because he simply does not understand the separation of the Justice, the Executive, and Parliament. Parliament has its duty, the Executive has its duty, and Justice has its duty. If Canadians are watching, the RCMP has all of the powers in the world to obtain the documents, and in fact, the Commissioner of the RCMP has written, the Auditor General has written. Well, relevancy is relevancy, Mr. Chair, and I will talk about relevancy. They're questioning someone who has already been a witness in front of another committee, and by God, they didn't question what was happening. The same answers he gave at the previous committee, they weren't questioning his relevancy, or they weren't mentioning a question of privilege. But of course, now they are doing that because they want to go into an election. Mr. Chair, I just have a hard time understanding. When the other side is saying we want to get to the bottom of this. How can we treat them seriously? Ce qui arrive, c'est qu'ils veulent aller à travers.
They want to ruin someone's reputation, someone who served Canada. They want to ruin the reputation of someone who not only served
while
his
he's in French, I appreciate you guys so much tonight. Everyone's being so generous with the gifted subs and super chats, and just thank you guys so much.
And a number of times they indicated that the former minister or the new minister have nothing to do with SDTC. And Mr. Chair, you'll recall from the first time I appeared, I've said, when will we stop investigating investigations of investigations? Because I'm starting to think that either we are incompetent, very incompetent, and there are people who were accountants on this committee. Either we are all incompetent because we've had over 8 meetings or 10 meetings, if I count the other committees who've looked at this. Well, it doesn't make any sense. We need to be consistent on this committee. We've always had a relationship before partisanship gets in, before the Conservatives had some wind in their sails. We always had good collaboration here at this committee. Even though I wasn't here, I was still following closely. I was member of the Government Operations Committee for 6 years.
Yeah,
and
get
I paid
to the
attention
point,
to what
man.
happened here because we also, before the Auditor General had the opportunity to study this, we were proposing studies for some issues that we wanted the Auditor General to look into. Once again, the fact that the opposition is questioning because they don't agree with the answers they received from a witness. They're questioning because they didn't hear what they wanted to hear. They express their opinions. They have editorials on Mr. Bains. And I don't know how it worked under the Conservative government, but I'd like to know because some people were appointed by Conservative ministers on boards of directors. So there was some pressure. But that's not how we work on this side. We heard a number of times from many witnesses that there was no pressure from ministers, that it was completely separated. We respect decisions that were made by SDTC, even though there were abuses. We need to stop going on hunts. So the Conservatives want to have these hunts every time. They want a question of privilege to try to stop what's happening in the House.
Oh, are your feelings hurt?
Very, very well here that the Conservative members want to embark on a hunt, and the motion was issued just after my colleague Ms. Khalid, who put forward a very good motion to see if the committee respects the independence of the Auditor General in doing her work. And right after that, a question of privilege. So I wonder what is happening. I imagine the Conservatives don't respect the independence of the Office of the Auditor General when it doesn't suit them. It obviously doesn't suit them. But don't worry, Mr. Perkins, I'll get back to the relevance because everything is connected. We're going in circles at this committee. And
You're
we have
going
for
in
months.
circles.
Mr. Perkins, Mr. Nader, Mr. Brock, Mr. Cooper, and even Garnett, who is asking questions. Nothing that they've asked over the last 3 months has given great revelations. Questions are being asked about which witness spoke to which witness, questioning some witnesses who are here under oath, telling the truth. And now, because Mr. Bains was a Liberal minister, they're saying, oh, he's crooked too. Mr. Chair, we need to have some respect at this committee if we really want to know what happened. I think we need to respect all the reports that were made, all of the testimony at this committee, and I would ask the official opposition to please ask questions that make sense because you're not impressing me at all right now. Thank you.
Oh, you're not impressed?
You.
Your feelings are hurt?
Khalid,
Come on, man.
Floor, please.
Much, Chair. And just
Oh,
to
no,
start,
not Ms. Khalid, no.
If it's okay with you, would like some clarification from the clerk as to what time she received the motion of privilege put forward by Mr. Perkins.
It was before yours.
And then I have comments to add to that. To that, Chair.
Well, I don't. Yeah, you can certainly respond to that, Clerk. I have no idea. It didn't impact the decision I made. But if you want to read out the timesheet of the email you received from, I believe, Mr. Perkins or his office.
All that matters is when I tabled it.
I know.
So I received it at 5:15 p.m. today.
So that really speaks to exactly what I'm wanting to talk about, Chair. We're talking about a motion of privilege where Mr. Perkins felt like his questions were not answered. They sent the motion in while Mr. Cooper was asking questions. This was premeditated.
Who
by
cares?
metadata, and I timestamps are there, and I'm
Who
sure
cares?
that if
They're better
anybody
than
wanted
you.
to look, please don't interrupt me.
Get better.
If anybody wanted to look,
You should have had
into
your stuff in
when
writing
this
before you
motion
came.
was created, according to the metadata, 5:12 p.m. and when last edited at 5:14. Mr. Cooper was still talking during that time, still had the opportunity to ask the questions of the witness. Now, what this says to me, and what the consistency of the actions of so many Conservatives that are sitting opposite me here today, is that this is not a question of privilege. This is a mockery. This is a mockery of our parliamentary system, trying to use the system to create their partisan games and to push witnesses into character assassinations, to leverage the time that we have in this committee for their own partisan benefits. I wonder how many dollars the Conservatives have raised out of clips today. And
More
how
than you.
those dollars... From Russian Rebel News, thank you. And how those dollars are being collected on the backs of taxpayers. Because let's be reminded, all of us, that this committee functions on the backs of taxpayer dollars. Our parliament functions on the backs of taxpayer dollars. We are here in Public Accounts Committee to make sure that taxpayer dollars are used efficiently and effectively. And the fact that Mr. Perkins would move a motion of privilege before there was any issue of the exact same thing that he's trying to talk about in his bogus motion here, that his privilege was somehow impacted on the backs of taxpayer dollars, raising Conservative fundraising dollars on the backs of taxpayer dollars. Why? Why can we not get to the work that this committee has been assigned to do? Why can we not get to the reports of the Auditor General? Why can we not actually talk about matters that are serious, that actually impact Canadians? I really don't understand, Chair, why we're going down this route. And I see each and every member of the Conservatives right now on their phones, as I'm sure that they're tweeting something or the other, to, again, put, oh, that's awesome. How is she doing? She's doing great? That's wonderful.
Mr. Perkins, come on.
Yeah, get schooled.
I'm so glad
Get schooled.
that Mr. Perkins has had a moment to connect with his wife. I'm sure she's a very lovely person, and I wish her all the very best. But I also
now she's trying to seem
would
wholesome
like
because she was trying to
Mr.
attack,
Perkins
and
to use
now she's on the
his
defense.
time as a member of Parliament in a more judicious manner. I think that
He'll contact
putting
his wife if he
forward
wants, honey.
bogus and disingenuous motions like this have a negative impact on what this committee is assigned to do and what it should be doing. Now, I'm just going to read out the words of the motion.
You already read it out.
Excuse me while I go through my lengthy password here. But the words of the motion, that the committee instruct the clerk and analysts to prepare a report to the House, which the chair shall table forthwith, outlining the potential breach of privilege concerning Navdeep Bains' refusal to answer questions, certain questions which the committee put to him, and his prevarication. My English is not as good as yours, Mr. Perkins, in answering others. Now,
she can't read a word.
Given the fact that this motion was drafted before questions were even answered by the witness today, while the questions were in process, while each member of the committee had time to ask their questions, that this motion was drafted way before then, really calls into question the motives of the Conservatives. And I, for one, do not want to sit here and let them play their games, because, quite frankly, Canadians deserve better than that. And what the Conservatives are doing, all 6, 7 of them that are in this committee today,
There's 6. Learn to count.
is quite deplorable. I really think that Canadians deserve better than to have their hard-earned dollars used for the purposes of partisan hack games. And I've
You're
had
a
enough
liberal
of
hack
this, Chair.
insider.
I don't think that this is a legitimate privileged motion.
Well, too bad it is.
This is
So
premeditated.
doesn't matter if it
and
is.
It is used. It
Get
is
better.
being used to raise fundraising dollars for the Conservatives.
Sorry, that's an
to
allegation.
delay
Hearsay.
Important legislative work
Point
in
of order.
the House of
Hearsay.
Commons, to delay important committee work in
Point of
this
order.
committee, and to agitate. We're not in the business of agitation here, Chair. We're in the business of trying to make sure that Canadians understand how their tax dollars are spent, that Canadians have the ability to review how we can improve the process of Canadian dollars in our government, in our democracy. And for us to be sitting here debating a bogus motion like this for the sole purpose of agitation, of delay, of raising fundraising dollars, that is quite the slap to the face of democracy and our democratic institutions.
You're a slap to the face.
And I can hear Mr. Perkins snickering right now, and it's very unfortunate because he knows exactly what he's done. He knows exactly what he's doing. And what he's doing is agitating. What he's doing is using Canadian taxpayer dollars to raise their own funds.
You just
I'm
contradicted
sure
yourself.
that Mr. Cooper does not have the floor, Chair. I'm sure that the floor is mine currently. But I would encourage all of my colleagues to really think about what you're doing and why. This is not how we govern. This is not how we should be conducting ourselves as parliamentarians. This is a very, very, I've defined my words so that I'm using parliamentary language. This is an attempt to take us away from the work of this committee. And I think that we are above that. I really do. I'm sure Mr. Perkins' wife would appreciate that he do the right thing. I would hope that Mr. Perkins acknowledge that this is not a motion of privilege at all.
Well, too bad it is.
This
Cry more.
is a motion of agitation.
You're agitating.
A motion of
You're agitating
agitation.
my brain.
Trying to use taxpayer dollars for political gain of the Conservative Party, to stop the House from functioning, to stop committees from functioning, to raise money for the Conservative Party using clickbait, Russian rebel news, what have you. It's not right. So I would encourage Mr. Perkins to back off, man. This
Back
is
off, man.
not the right thing to do. This is not the right thing to do. I think we have better things to get to in this committee.
You know what? Oh,
I don't think that
just
this
realized.
motion is in order at all.
Well, too bad it
I
is,
think
and it's
that
going to get
we
voted
have,
on.
in my
And there's
9
more conservatives
years
here.
As a member of
It's gonna
parliament, I
pass.
have sat on a lot of committees.
And you still don't know how a committee
the
works.
experienced litigator. In my 9 years as a member of parliament, I have listened to a lot of testimony from witnesses. We do not get to decide what witnesses that we invite to this committee have to say. We can ask them for clarification in writing. We can subpoena them to come to committee and answer questions. But, Chair, this is your call, how a committee is functioning and what a witness is able to or not able to say in committee. So this should be just as much of a concern to you as it is to me right now. One, your privilege and your order as chair is questioned, but also, what's the purpose here? Are we now setting a precedent where every single witness that comes to committee across the entirety of our committees is now going to be judged as to whether they have answered a question or not answered a question? And to whose liking is that question going to be answered? I'm sure that Mr. Perkins, even, after his role with being appointed with the BDC, would love to sit there and judge whether a witness has actually answered a question to his liking or not. This reminds me of Trump, to be honest, where, he decides whether something is foreign interference or it's not, or is democratic or not, based on where somebody is on the political spectrum, whether they support them or they don't support them. And this is the exact same thing. And I think that if we pass this motion today, if we even entertain this motion today, we are giving in to the politics of agitation here today. And I do not think that that is the right way for us to approach our democratic institutions and the way that we function here as a committee. So, Chair, I will park my comments there, but I would like to get back onto the bottom of your list. I'm just letting you know, bottom of the list. Thank you, Chair.
No more speaking time for you.
And you have been added to the list. Next is Ms. Bradford. You have the floor, please.
Oh, not another
Mr.
Liberal.
Chair. I must say I'm a little bit alarmed that you based your ruling that this was actually a privilege based on Mr. Firth. There's no way that Mr. Bains could be possibly put in the same category as Mr. Firth, who, as we all know, is in a class all by himself. I was here at this meeting, and I found Mr. Bains to be a very credible, respectful witness. In all of our committees, we ask questions. Usually when we ask the question, we don't already know the answer. Sometimes we do, but sometimes we don't. And so we have to accept the witness's answers as given, even if we don't like the answer. Now, what I observed before, while the opposition was questioning this witness, as is often the case, the witness wasn't even given a chance to respond. They were constantly interrupted. He would try to say something and he would be interrupted constantly.
Because he wasn't answering
the
question.
There is a certain level of rudeness with that. We invite people here to testify, and we should give them a chance to answer the questions. And unfortunately, I find that wasn't the case today, and now the opposition is complaining that he didn't answer the questions. Well, he needed some airtime in order to do that without being constantly interrupted. And this goes on and on and on. And it's a very bad reflection on this place and the people that serve here. One of the things that I would like to point out, so I got elected in 2021, and I was appointed to this committee by the whip. And I remember the whip telling me, you are going to love serving on the Public Accounts Committee because you're going to learn so much about the operations of government. Because you review the Auditor General's reports. The Auditor General examines many different things. She decides what she wants to look at and reports back with inadequacies. And there's learning to be had from that. I wish that's what this committee was doing. I would say for the last 8 months, we haven't had the opportunity to review reports. We haven't been tabling reports from this committee in the House because we're no longer reviewing the Auditor General's reports. Instead, this committee, like most parliamentary committees, is being held up with motions, whether they're privileged or not, brought forward by the opposition, always the same motions on 4 different committees, looking for a smoking gun on some kind of a witch hunt. The prize would be to tar a cabinet minister with some wrongdoing. And there's nothing to see, but it ties up very expensive resources. I want Canadians to know that these committees cost thousands of dollars every time we meet. So if we're talking about wasting taxpayers' dollars and being judicious about taxpayers' dollars being spent fraudulently or not in a good way what's happening at our committees when every committee is dealing with the same motions. This committee probably had 25 meetings on ArriveCan. Do Canadians care about ArriveCan anymore?
Sure they do.
Meetings.
Give us our money
Probably
back.
each meeting costs $10,000 or $15,000 when you think of the analysts and the clerks and the interpreters and the catering and all the resources.
You don't need catering.
For nothing. So now we're going down the same rabbit hole, this time with Sustainable Development Technology Canada. Same thing. Multiple committees looking at this. For what?
Because there's so much
corruption. The
corruption.
problem has already been resolved. We know there was a problem, but when it was brought to light by the Auditor General's report, immediately the current minister decided to transition it over to the NRC and appointed a temporary brand new board of 3, and it'll be transitioned by the end of this year to the NRC. The funding will resume. It's under control. So really, when the problems are taken care of, I don't know why we persist in continuing to find fault that no longer exists. It has been dealt with. So I find this a very, very frustrating process. And there is a letter that I would like to read into the record from our Auditor General, because again, I remind everyone, this is the Public Accounts Committee. We are supposed to be reviewing the Auditor General's reports and looking at her work. And we shouldn't be doing anything that impedes her work. However, I want to read into the record because I think it's an important document. It's a letter to our chair, Mr. John Williamson, dated June the 10th of this year. Dear Mr. Williamson, I'm writing further to the motion in the House of Commons seeking the production of documents regarding Sustainable Development Technology Canada. I understand that it would be considered by the House of Commons this afternoon. I wanted to ensure that the Standing Committee on Public Accounts is aware of some of the short-term and long-term impacts of this motion. In my view, the requirement to produce my entire audit file to the law clerk and parliamentary counsel compromises my independence and is also likely to discourage departments, agencies, and Crown corporations from providing me free and timely access to the information required for my audits going forward. The objective of this motion appears to be about ensuring that the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP, has access to the information in my audit file. In cases where the RCMP has engaged with my office, we have always cooperated in a timely manner. Doing so has always involved direct communication with the RCMP investigators and a timely response by my office to production orders from the RCMP. It is unclear to me why the law clerk and parliamentary counsel should be part of this established process with the RCMP. I believe that it is also important to inform the committee that there will be considerable expense to my office to produce our entire audit file to the law clerk and parliamentary counsel. Our understanding is that the translation of all documents would be required. The budget for my office's resources does not include such expenses. We would need to divert financial resources that would otherwise be used to produce audits for Parliament. Yours sincerely, Karen Hogan, Auditor General of Canada. Clearly, the point our Auditor General is making, this request or demand is compromising her work and her future work. It would cause great disruption to her department, take them off the work they would normally be doing, great expense she doesn't have a budget for.
Let the AG speak for herself.
To do something that shouldn't be requested in the first place, because it not only compromises her, it would also compromise the independence of the RCMP. So I do have really, really grave concerns about this privilege motion, about why we have to debate it. I don't think just because some of the MPs didn't like the answers that Mr. Bains, our witness tonight, was giving when he had an opportunity to speak, and that was very limited, I don't think that means that somebody's privilege has been abused. You know, we called him here. He was quite prepared to answer it. And yes, maybe sometimes he did use the phrase, I don't recall. We often hear that. You have to consider the man left the position as the minister in January of 2021. That'll soon be 5 years ago. How many of us can remember every conversation and meeting that we had 4.5 or 5 years ago? I know I don't. Maybe some of you do. I don't think it's reasonable to expect anyone to. And I think if they say, I don't recall, that's very likely an honest answer.
He didn't recall a lot of
things.
So
those are the points that I wanted to speak to this. And thank you for giving me time.
You are welcome, Ms. Bradford.
You're not welcome. You're not welcome.
Next,
whoa,
Ms. Sinclair Desgagne, please.
I got to turn her down. There we go.
Merci, Monsieur. Thank you, Mr. Chair. One issue that is important to me is that a member of the government now is not accepting the premise that answers from the witness were totally unsatisfactory, and I'll get back to that, but feels entitled to criticize the quality of the questions. I don't think he's understood how a committee operates. The questions are asked by the person asking them. The answers need to be based on those questions and answered in good faith. I have a good example of a question that was not asked at industry regarding my first questions on his meetings with Amber Batul when she was chief of staff at SDTC. He started by telling me that he had met her maybe once or twice, and then he continued and told me that he met her a few times. And then when I asked him how many times he met with Ms. Batul when he was minister and she was chief of staff at SDTC, he said he doesn't know if it was once or twice or 10 or 15 times. That is strictly impossible. That means that the person is answering in bad faith, because anybody here could give a ballpark number for the number of times somebody was met with over a period of time. I can tell you how many times in the ballpark. Otherwise, it's bad faith. And that, Mr. Chair, is unacceptable. Mr. Bains answered no question asked calmly and respectfully by this committee. And it's deplorable because we need to do important work. The Auditor General raised a number of very problematic issues, and he was the minister responsible for SDTC when all of the facts described in the Auditor General's report were committed. So he's supposed to be able to answer questions, and he did not do so. He had a number of opportunities to do so today, and he did not do so. And in addition, there's the example I just gave showing bad faith, showing a simple refusal to answer questions from parliamentarians, which to me is a breach of parliamentary privilege. So I won't take longer on that, and I hope we will be able to proceed as quickly as possible to a vote to determine if this was really a motion of privilege. But please know that I do think there is a breach of parliamentary privilege here. Thank you.
I agree. I agree.
Thank you very much. Next.
Mr. Erskine Smith, please. You have the floor.
Thanks, Chair. So a couple things on this, but it is, I think, virtually impossible, given where we are at right now in this process, that if we were to report back to the House on this question, that the Speaker would find a prima facie case of that their privilege has been breached here. We have a situation where a witness said they didn't recall in a couple of cases, where the witness was repeatedly cut off in the midst of answering a question, And I take the point of Natalie that she didn't feel her questions were directly answered in a way that she was looking for. The witness is still in the midst of, from what I heard from the chair, very clearly at the outset, and then again when he excused Mr. Bains, that there was an understanding that he could come back and he was willing to come back. And so I've said this previously that it was premature, but it very obviously, if we were to report it at this time, it would not be a prima facie breach of privilege. I mean, not only does it not amount to anywhere close to the Firth precedent, which was a deeply concerning precedent, this is no different from any number of instances of testimony I've heard over the years where we don't get the yes or no answer that we demand from a witness, perhaps, but there's still an answer whether we like it or not. And I should just note, because there have been many aspersions of criminal conduct on Ms. Verschuren by Conservatives, we should know, in the midst of answering a question about Ms. Verschuren and the point that she was appointed by the Harper government initially on a board, we should, it would be worth understanding, and I don't know if Conservatives fully understand her history, and we know that the Ethics Commissioner has found a couple of violations. For example, she should have recused herself instead of abstaining. In a second instance, she voted for a bundled approval in keeping with legal advice, and ultimately that was incorrect advice to follow. But this isn't a criminal character and criminal conduct here, despite what Conservatives allege. And if we had allowed Mr. Bains to finish his answer, we would have learned, for example, that she began her career as a development officer with the Cape Breton Development Corporation. She then worked with the Canada Development Investment Corporation. She then worked at Amasco. She launched Michaels of Canada. For those who know, I've got kids who enjoy arts and crafts. And then she landed the CEO role at Home Depot, where she grew that company, Home Depot Canada, in a significant way. She has been appointed to a number of government advisory roles, including the Economic Advisory Council during the economic crisis in 2008, the Canada-U.S. Council for the Advancement of Women Entrepreneurs and Business Leaders, the Advisory Council for NAFTA. She recently participated in government roundtables on climate action decarbonization. She is the chair of the Mars Discovery District Board. She's on the board of the Ontario Energy Association. In 2011, in the Harper tenure, she was honored as an Officer of the Order of Canada for her contributions. She was appointed in 2010 as the co-chair of the Governor General's Leadership Conference.
Yeah,
relevance.
Yes,
sure. What's the point of order?
Yes,
yeah, sure.
I do have to, and yes, Mr.
Yeah, this is not relevant to the question of privilege regarding Mr. Bains's non-response.
Well, it is. Yes, it is, because he was cut off. Mr. Bains was cut off in answer to a specific question. Mr. Bains was cut off in answer to a specific question by Mr. Perkins about Ms. Verschuren when he was starting to articulate her long-standing record of public service and contribution, including the fact she was appointed by not only Harper, but by Flaherty. And so, yes, her record, that answer is relevant because she was cut off in the course of answering it. And to be of assistance, I mean, and I'm almost done, Garnett, I'm almost done. In 2010, she was appointed co-chair of the 2012 Governor General's Leadership Conference, Canada's premier leadership training event, and she was honored by the Canadian Business Hall of Fame in 2019. So cast criminal aspersions as you like, but definitely do it with parliamentary privilege at your back, because it's defamatory outside of the House of Commons, because there is no criminal conduct here on behalf of Ms. Verschuren, and a long-standing record of contribution to Canada. And keep in mind here that, yes, I'll be the first to criticize the conduct of STDC in relation to its conflicts mess. I'll be the first to criticize the fact that they were following incredibly bad legal advice. I'll be the first to criticize ethics violations where, yes, of course, a recusal should have been necessary instead of an abstention. Of course, they should not have bundled approval where they were considering past conflicts as sufficient, and they should have declared continued conflicts. Of course, that is the case, and that is why major action has been taken to clean up that mess. But to suggest criminal conduct and then to cut off former Minister Bains when he's in the midst of answering a question about her character, and then to further claim that your privilege has been violated because questions weren't answered, answers that you had previously cut off, I mean, it is laughable. And we can invite Mr. Bains back, because my understanding was his testimony wasn't over. So I'll be voting against a privilege motion because this sets a terrible precedent.
Shut up and let it get to a vote.
If this is a violation of privilege, any witness that comes and doesn't give us an answer we like ends up being a violation of privilege. And a violation of privilege is something we should take very, very seriously. And we should not lower the standard in a laughable partisan way. And the second thing I will say is, it is I will guarantee you, if we report this back to the House, it will be dismissed by the Speaker, because it is impossible to think that on such a low standard that would apply to so many witnesses that we've seen come to this committee and many other committees, where we get an answer we don't like. Do not recall. You might not like that answer, but that's an answer, Mr. Perkins, and you might not like it, but it's certainly not going to be found to be a prima facie violation and breach of privilege.
Well, you're not the one who makes that ruling, so...
Thank you. Suivant, c'est Monsieur Drouin, s'il vous plaît.
Next, Mr. Drouin. Mr. Chair. Thank you once again. I'm looking closely at what's happening with this question of privilege, or the motion that was presented by my dear colleague, Mr. Perkins. At the same time, if I look at what happened on the other side, all of the parties on the other side of the House, there are a number of members who used funds to go to conventions and said, yes, I went to caucus, but I used public funds to go to conventions.
What the hell does this have to do with the motion?
Whether it's the Bloc, the NDP, or the Conservatives, they're all the same. We put an end to that practice in 2014. When we talk about transparency, when I hear my colleagues on the other side of the House talk about transparency and ensuring money is spent properly. Excuse me. I'll get back to the issue.
Yeah, you're off topic.
I'll remind you that your entire caucus visited my riding in St. Andrews just 2 short years ago. So,
Mr. Chair,
but I would ask you to stick to the relevance,
Here in
please.
Ottawa, how was the...
Et vous avez...
And you are entirely correct. We visited your riding, but it was a caucus, not a political convention, and that's the difference. And you haven't understood it. Well, you want to take power, you want to govern, but you don't even understand the rules of the House, Mr. Chair. I have a problem with that. And the other side, it's the same, Mr. Drouin. It's not for you to talk about relevancy.
That is my job, to keep members on relevance to the motion.
Justement, vous êtes sur une...
You are on a pedestal. You're talking about having transparency. It's important for witnesses to appear before our committee. It's important to advocate for doing things properly, for spending money properly, taxpayer money. And you are in opposition, and you're not even able to spend public money where we have rules in the House. And here you are accusing us. Of course, at SDTC, there are people who made mistakes. But from there to... Listen, Mr. Bains came here. I wouldn't even be surprised if Mr. Bains came here and we asked the question, who consulted you, Mr. Bains, about coming before our committee? Was it your aunt? Was it your uncle? Now we'll invite everyone's aunt and uncle here. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense anymore, Mr. Chair. It needs to stop. The Auditor General produced a report. There was a report from Raymond Chabot. They produced an excellent report. There's another report from McCarthy Tétrault. There are 3. When will it stop? And the proof is that it's not even related. The proof is that even the leader of the official opposition, Pierre Poilievre, has false petitions inviting people to sign here. But what I've noticed is that it's not even sign here. It redirects people to a partisan website from the Conservative Party. So there's no relation with what's happening here. And now there's blame. My colleague, Mr. Erskine Smith, is totally correct. If this is deemed to be a question of privilege, then any witness who comes here, those who believe in climate change, for example, and those who don't believe in climate change, I'll mention the Bloc and the NDP, they believe in climate change. The other side isn't so sure. But those who appear here Well, if we question their testimony and say it's a question of privilege, well, it makes no sense. And I'll get back to what Ms. Khalid, Ms. Bradford have said. All of this is in the hope of creating interference and obstruction in Parliament, in the House of Commons.
Okay, wrap it up
and
here,
you
Twinkle
already
Toes.
have parliamentary obstruction. You're obstructing on your own motion. It makes no sense. Can we treat this committee, public accounts, with respect? Are we able to focus on issues that are really what Canadians and Quebecers want us to look at? For example, cybercrime. The Auditor General produced a report on that. But because we're doing investigations into investigations into investigations, we're not looking at other issues that are much more important for seniors. The Bloc Québécois advocates for seniors in the House day after day. Are they telling me that the seniors are not important at this committee? Are they saying we shouldn't look at the Auditor General's report on cybercrime, which we know that people who are victims are mainly seniors? No. We'll do other investigations into investigations. We'll say that the witnesses who appear here are no longer credible. It makes no sense, Mr. Chair. And I would invite my colleagues, in all transparency, my colleagues from the Conservative Party, to reveal how much they've fundraised on this issue, because I'm sure apparently it's not enough because they want to keep talking about this, but they don't want to talk about other issues that are more important for Canadians and Quebecers. And I think I've already mentioned an example that's important. But I'll come back to Mr. Erskine-Smith's point on the issue of precedent that we are creating. Mr. Erskine-Smith, I'm looking at you on the screen. Your child is there. Great. Yes, we'll all say "ah." But the question that's important
on topic, man.
is if we don't agree with what a witness tells us at committee, will we raise our hands and say it's a question of privilege? I see that the opposition parties are not interested in working to advance important issues for Canadians. Some will take partisan reasons. They want to collect more names. Give me your name, give me your address, give me your phone number. And yes, we'll work on your issue. And what are the other parties doing? Well, they're complicit. Pierre Poilievre, Yves-François Blanchet, and Jagmeet Singh have a coalition. They're all guilty of working together. And I'm sure that Pierre Poilievre is extremely, well, he must be so popular in Quebec. I'm sure the Bloc is proud of defending him. But they're following the Conservative line, and I don't understand why. And the NDP is in the same boat, following the Conservative Party line, and I don't understand why. So I don't know what type of coalition is happening on the other side of the House, but it would seem that there's a new coalition, Pierre Poilievre, the Bloc Québécois, and the NDP. Mr. Perkins can say what he wants, but there was no problem when he was appointed by a Conservative to a board of directors. Inaudible. But Liberals were not appointed. We know, Mr. Perkins, you are best friends. You gave, like the CEO of the board of directors, you're in the same boat. You didn't give $1, $2, $3. You gave $1,600 to a candidate for your leadership. You're guilty. You're in the same boat. And now you're trying to smear us with that, and I don't agree with that. The minister, the new minister, François-Philippe Champagne, has nothing to do with this. Mr. Bains has nothing to do with this, and you know that full well.
Point of order, Mr. Perkins.
9 Liberal directors have been...
Mr. Perkins, Mr. Perkins.
He made a reference. That member made a reference to me.
That does not give you the right of
doing
reply.
the same thing of what Liberal appointees done. Liberal appointees have stolen $400 million.
Mr. Perkins, that does not give you the right of reply on the spot. If you would like to raise your hand, I'll put you down. Mr. Drouin, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I see that people are passionate, even near 7 p.m. Who stole money? Well, if there are people who stole money, well, let's let the RCMP do their job. Let's let the RCMP investigate, do their own investigation. Let's let the RCMP, if there were people who are guilty, put them before a judge and put them in prison. I have no problem with that. My problem
so then you'll be in prison.
There's these fishing expeditions with Mr. Bains, with Minister Champagne. They are not looking at this level of detail. They work much higher. That's my problem. The opposition heard loud and clear. There were questions, even this week, to the board of directors about things that didn't happen. Yes, what are you going to do? Well, can we let the board of directors see the report before making a decision? That would be the most rational thing to do. But no, that's not what's being done. There are accusations, reputations are being smeared that have nothing to do with this. To have more names in their database for the Conservative Party, to be able to raise even more funds. And we heard this.
Point of order.
Point of order.
As much as I'm thrilled to be sitting in committee at 6:52, listening to this wonderful tale told by my colleague, he's repeated himself numerous times, Chair, and you know the rules, and he knows the rules with respect to original thought. He's running out the clock, repeating the same talking lines.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Brock.
Let it get to a vote, man.
You do have the floor. I ask you to remain relevant and to come up with new ideas. Over to you, please.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much. It seems that my colleagues don't like the fact that we are highlighting everything that was revealed at committee. Oh, we see reinforcements. Mr. McCauley has arrived to committee. Welcome. We have 2, 4, 6, 7 members of the Conservative Party.
Wow,
it takes a lot of heads from the Conservative Party to fight the Liberals. That's okay. We appreciate that. How's the interpretation, Mr. McCauley?
Oui. Ben, c'est justement le non-sens.
So, what doesn't make sense is how many meetings are we going to have? 8 meetings so far. Indu met a number of times. The same people
again, he's repeating
who were asking
himself.
questions
Point of
were
order.
there at the other committee, and here they are again. And the same questions were asked as at Indu in June. There's never been a question of privilege on what Mr. Bains has said, and then, whoops, all of a sudden, there's no answer. Maybe he said the truth, maybe he didn't. We don't like this. Quite frankly, Mr. Chair, you're taking me for a fool, and I don't accept that.
Well, you are a fool.
I don't accept that. I'm referring to myself. Well, I'm referring to myself.
If you insist, you have the floor.
There is. I didn't treat anybody of you. I treated myself. So you know.
Si vous insistez, allez-y.
I didn't insult anybody but me.
But the fact is, we're questioning the whether or not Mr. Bains' testimony was satisfactory to questions that the opposition was asking, and he perhaps didn't know the answers. I mean, I would love to question everybody on testimony what happened 8 years ago, and that is not a question of privilege. I'm sorry, but that is not a question of privilege.
Well, you don't get to decide that.
And time again, we have heard from different testimony that ministers or ministers' offices were not involved in the day-to-day operations.
Okay, you're repeating yourself again.
We have heard from time to
Point of order.
time and time again, and they're still not believing that. Alors, je pose la question.
So I'm asking the question. So how much time do we want to spend here to keep playing these games?
We got a new interpreter. She's a little bit louder.
We're going in circle here. Like, as a committee, we're going in circle. And I've been here for 5 committee meetings. And no MPs from the opposition has taught me anything new. I mean, things we didn't know already. So for me, Mr. Chair, when...
It was a quick line. Mr. Dillon, you have the floor.
Is I repetition or the opposition repetition? Or you can call me out, Rick. You're giving me a break anyway. So, but more seriously, when we're questioning whether or not a witness who has already appeared and been questioned by the same member at a previous committee in June, whether or not this is a question of privilege, has absolutely nothing to do with SDTC, but everything to do with what is happening in the House. They don't want to come to work. We know. They want to go into an election right away. They've all told us. So they're not interested in getting to the bottom of this. So any motion of production of papers that they put forth is not serious. I haven't said that word, by the way. But it's not serious because they want to go into an election tomorrow morning. They probably have their campaign office already rented, their campaign signs. Haven't said that, by the way. That's not reputation. Right? So I'm just saying I'm questioning the seriousness of them to actually get to the bottom of this. And it's shameful that we're asking a member who've already appeared before committee and testified.
Now, Mr. Durian, this is now getting.
Well, I put a new adjective to it,
yeah,
Mr.
but
Chair.
that's you are getting repetitive. So.
I will conclude on that. Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Chair, I'm going to conclude on this. I was really expecting that the Conservative Party would play those political games. What I wasn't expecting is that the party of Jack Mitzing or the Bloc Québécois would align with the Conservatives. And I'm sure that in Quebec, people who are, aligning themselves with Pierre Poilievre, they have no respect because Pierre Poilievre does not reflect the value of francophones, whether they are in Quebec or anywhere else in Canada.
Pierre Poilievre has no interest in what has happened.
We're getting multiple interpreters
CBC,
here.
And what interests him is that funds are collected, more petitions are collected to have more names in their database. On that note, Chair, I am going to conclude my remarks. Thank you. Thank you. You were really under the line here.
Have a 5-minute health recess, and we'll come back, and Ms. Khalid will have the floor. So just a 5-minute recess for everyone. Meeting is.
Okay. What I think is going to happen is because I've seen this happen before, is it's going to stay suspended till like tomorrow or like whenever they meet next again, and they're going to pick back up off what happened because, I mean, they're already an hour over time and they only have so much resources in terms of, how long they pay the interpreters for. The interpreters are only scheduled for certain amounts of time and stuff like that. So, I know a lot of us want to go watch hockey games and things like that. So I personally don't want to listen to Khalid talk anymore. I'm sure the rest of us don't want to. So we could call it here because I think that was enough of a gong show for everybody to watch. I think they've got pretty much nothing left besides Liberal filibustering. I don't think they'll get to a vote on this motion today. I mean, they might miss it, but I don't think they'll get to it today. I think it's Liberals are just going to filibuster the time, and they're just going to talk and talk and talk. So I just want to do a quick shout out before we go. Everybody was really nice in the chat today. We had Little Noof, Mr. G, Gocho Donnie. Sorry if I'm saying your name wrong. Tammy, Sheba, Tamalin, Pankode, Madawa, Mrs. Madawamis, and more Gocho Donnie. Really appreciate you guys with the super chats and the gifting memberships. That's really awesome, guys. It really helps the channel. So I don't think we're gonna miss anything here, guys. That's pretty much it to see for this. This was I think we all lost brain cells listening to Miss Khalid's point of orders, and if we have to listen to her talk anymore tonight, I think we're gonna go stupid. So cheers, guys, and I appreciate everybody tuning in. Everybody watching, subscribing, things like that. It's been awesome today. We'll get a live stream on tomorrow. We've got, question period at 2 p.m. There'll probably be another committee that I'm going to cover. I just got to double check to see what's on the agenda for tomorrow's committees. And just everybody try to wash this filibustering off you. And I don't know how many points of orders. There are over 30 points of orders today, that half of them weren't even points of orders, and it's just ridiculous. See you guys tomorrow, and have a fantastic rest of your night. Thank you so much, everyone. Cheers.